Environmental sort of hydrology. I never did hear it. Yeah, well, hopefully, like you said, this guy's
Hi, Zoe, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, and I can hear you. We're just going to turn camera and mics off until it's time to present, which should be pretty quickly for you.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. No problem. Yeah. She's right now.
It's the guy Yes. No, Yes, I do. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Just a joke.
It's just like all of a sudden nothing worked.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our February 8th council meeting. Just so everybody knows, we have 7 of us around the council chambers this evening for councillors, and we have Councillor McConaughey and Councillor Skaken are by phone or Zoom, Ms. Conley.
Your Worship, Councillor Skaken is via phone and Councillor McConaughey is on Zoom.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, welcome everybody. We have the adoption of the amended agenda. The amendment is in correspondence. You should have got copies of the correspondence that at F9 and F10. So if I could have a motion to adopt the amended agenda, please. Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Seconder, Councillor Kraus. All those in favor? Those opposed on the phone and Zoom? Seeing no opposition, it's carried unanimously. Council, we have 3 sets of minutes to adopt. They are January 11th, January 25th, and January 27th, and we can do those as a bundle. Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Ramsey, all those in favor in the room. Opposed on Zoom or phone. Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. And this evening, our first delegation is Inspiring Women Among Us, and I think, Ms. Kellett, we have our presenters lined up. I want to welcome Annie Booth and Zoe Miletus. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Kellett, to connect them in.
thank you, Worship. Go ahead, Dr. Booth and Zoe.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for having us back again. Dr. Booth and I really delight in coming to thank you and to sort of show you how well spent your investment in Iowa is. And so I'm going to just start off with a quick review of Iowa 2020, which took place this past November. And then my lovely colleague, Dr. Booth, will get to the real reason why we're here. So hopefully you all had a chance to look at the website and to take a look at this report that you see before you. Just going to pull out some highlights. And I want to thank our student assistant this year, who's also my graduate student, Annie Pumphrey, and nobody can hire her until she's done her master's, but you see her beautiful work before you, a very skilled graphics and communications person. So this is a very difficult year, and we could have easily said, you know what, we're not going to do Inspiring Women this year because we are all certainly busier than ever before, and also maybe lacking energy. But we really thought, no, this more than ever is a year where people need something like Iowa to come together, to break up the monotony, to use as a rallying point. And this year, our theme was Sharing Power Now, Diversifying Leadership, building on some of our previous efforts with the city and other partners to really push for increased representation and training and mentorship, coming together to discuss getting women and other members of underrepresented groups into leadership. So at Iowa events, we have everybody from youth to elders. We're now a known entity attracting different kinds of federal funding. So thank you to Councillor Frizzell for our partnership with the city to engage in a Federation of Canadian Municipalities project called Claiming Spaces. We've also had Social Science and Humanities Research Council funding 3 times. On top of that, as you saw in our snazzy infographic, we engage a lot of community partners. So we had 22 free events this year, all online as a first. Actually, there was 1 rally in person. We had over 364 attendees from much further afield than usual. All of our 19 presenters, all of them were members of underrepresented groups. That is no small feat. If you keep up with the literature on leadership and speaking engagements and the lack of diversity, you know what a big deal that is. We collaborated with 11 community partners. We also had coffee and tea tabs at 5 local businesses because we also understand how much our small businesses are hurting this year. And 2 students gained valuable expertise through paid or volunteer partnerships. We want to give a special shout out this year to the UNBC Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology, who really helped us do all of this online, and our assistant Jacqueline. And if you went through the report, you know that we have accolades from places like Winnipeg, Guelph. We had a speaker from National Geographic, so that literally put Prince George on the map. And we had a really strong social media participation. We had a very vibrant and well thought out, carefully planned International Transgender Day of Remembrance, thanks to our community partners, and so much more. We also got to welcome the Two Rivers Gallery new executive director, Sarah Nelman, who gave a fascinating talk on feminism and collage. And we dealt with topics like imposter syndrome and really just welcomed diverse audiences. And we had amazing support from all of our media partners, including a new growing partnership with CFER, the university-based radio station. So thank you to all of those community partners and sponsors. And the last thing I'll say before turning it over to Dr. Booth is that we really like to direct money to the Iowa Award. We've given 17 awards to really deserving individuals. We've raised over $36,000 to date. So we try to keep that money where it belongs. And so that's why we partner with the city and the university and craft our quilt of fundraising together to protect that money to go really to women who are facing significant barriers in attaining a higher education. So that's my spiel. And now over to Annie.
Good evening, Dr. Booth.
Of course, kindly, Zoe has left me with the difficult portion of it. I think she has done a lovely job of summarizing the success of 2020, but also the success of Iowa going back to 2015, when we began organizing and offering Iowa, and the vast diversity. Many of the counselors, I think, are aware of the people, the speakers, the events that Iowa has brought in to the community and to the region, not just to the university, but we've always seen this, and it is acknowledged as a community-based event, not a university-based event. As you might imagine, this is accomplished by a dedicated group of volunteers, people who work very hard to get this pulled together. Unfortunately, Zoe and I are often at the center of the particular tsunami that is the planning for Iowa. The difficulty that we face is we both acknowledge that the City of Prince George, as well as the university and other sponsors, have been generous in providing support over the years. We have always faced the challenge of not really knowing, as we were planning Iowa, what it was that we could actually expect in terms of funding. And so there was always some very sweaty nights as you're looking at who we've asked and what the costs are associated, and wondering who is actually going to come through with financial resources. And while we've been fortunate to receive 3 Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grants in a row, that is by no means likely to continue. And in fact, we did not receive one the last time that we applied, because they like to share the resources around. And so one of our asks of council, given the amazing diversity of events that Iowa brings in every year, is to possibly consider making Zoe and my lives in the fall just a tad easier, is to consider a long-term yearly allocation, so that we had, and we're going to make the same ask of UNBC, though Jeff Payne doesn't know this is coming, so don't tell him, we'd like it to be a surprise, so that we have some sort of estimate of what our baseline budget is every year. It can say, well, these are the events that we know we can absolutely guarantee payment to, for honoraria, for rental spaces, for supporting the small businesses. You know, Zoe didn't mention, but things like Two Rivers Gallery rely on Iowa to actually provide the funding for them to offer the events that go on in relationship to the Inspiring Women Among Us event every year. And if we were to have, say, a 3 or a 4 year guarantee of so much per year, subject to satisfactorily accounting and accommodating, that would go a long way to ensuring that Iowa is a long-term sustainable event, that we can guarantee it's going to be able to continue to happen, that it's going to happen without Zoe and I reaching a burnout point and not being able to find people to replace us. We would genuinely see this as a significant contribution to the long-serving success of Iowa and to the ongoing opportunity for Iowa to bring in the sort of activities and speakers and events that we have over the last 5 years. So we would leave it to council to determine the length of time, and certainly to think about the regular amount that they have made available to us, recognizing the usual economic exigencies that have been the reality for the last year. But that guaranteed ongoing support for a commitment of a few years would definitely allow Iowa to plan into the future and to continue to be a benefit to the Society of Prince George and the region. We would actually like to thank the City of Prince George for being a very early and continuous sponsor of Iowa. That has been an invaluable bonus and has allowed us to bring in everything that we have. And it seems a shame to reward that sort of commitment with yet another ask, but these things aren't free, and they certainly don't come cheap. And the quality of speakers that we have been able to bring in has come because of the support that we have actually received. So with that, we'd like to thank you for your ongoing support. We would also like to acknowledge the work of Dyra Pridham, who had been the city's link to Inspiring Women Among Us. And with her departure, we would also ask that the city might consider who might be the Iowa representative from the city, so that we can continue to liaise and coordinate events, and ensuring that the city is represented and partners with Iowa in an easy and seamless way that has happened so far. So with that, we extend our thanks and our appreciation for the city's ongoing participation and support of Iowa. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And I do have a few folks in the queue. Councillor Frizzell, followed by Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, Dr. Miletus, Dr. Booth. Thank you for the presentation and for your years and years of work on Inspiring Women Among Us. The refrain we hear constantly about the leaders in northern BC is that they tend to have a lot of side projects on their desk, and where we can help to take that off of the side of a desk and to provide support, I think that's something that is well worth it. And I'm not just saying that from my side. The project Claiming Spaces that Penina Harding and Annie Pumphrey put together under your guidance, it did inspire. It was broadcast to 2,050 municipalities all across Canada. It was tweeted about to 25,000 followers from the FCM account. And in the words of Stephanie Hoey, the coordinator, that they were inspired with the creativity, with the resilience, and with the dedication. And that dedication was obvious. The original project, as you remember, was approved well before the pandemic was even in our sights. And through the year, the resilience and the perseverance as you came through and developed the new design for Claiming Spaces was remarkable. I'm glad, Dr. Booth, that you mentioned Dyra Pridham. Her work was essential from our side in contributing, and I really appreciate that she came up. Through to administration, what would be the process for considering a request so that we could determine the scope, magnitude, and duration?
Mr. Babich.
Your Worship, a referral motion from Council for us to review the ask and report back, Your Worship, would be in order. And administration will reach out with a new liaison name for the organization in the near future, Your Worship.
Excellent. I so move.
Okay, could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Scott. Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor McConaughey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was going to suggest a motion back through to administration, but Councillor Frizzell beat me to it. I guess what I would love to say is that I'd love to support that being referred back and see what administration comes back with. I know we have a couple, I think, service agreements or arrangements with other groups, so I'd be interested to see what that looks like. I just want to say a big thank you through to Iowa. I think that this group does incredibly important work continuously in our community. You know, as a female in politics, it's very interesting at times, and you know, these types of events that you put on give me a lot of hope for the young females in our community becoming future leaders. I think my notes said amazing, amazing, amazing. You know, I thought for a virtual event, the tea and coffee tabs at the local coffee company or businesses was just a really nice touch to a virtual event, and I think that you guys transitioned incredibly well to an online platform, and I hope going forward that we'll see perhaps some version of online to make it accessible. It's amazing that you had so many individuals join from across North America, so thank you so much for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Councillor McConaughey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall, and I just want to thank the presenters and your entire crew for everything that you do. And Councillor Frizzell was way ahead of me as usual and got the motion on the floor. I think that's the right course of action, and I fully support it when the time comes to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott, followed by Councillor Sampson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and definitely thank you to our presenters. The work that you've both done going back to the beginning of this whole enterprise has been outstanding. And I know many conversations about, you know, this is more than off the side of my desk. This is becoming bigger and better and better and bigger. And what could be more than that? And whatever we can do to continue the conversation between Iowa and the city of Prince George, we're going to do it. And thank you for the presentation. And you're right, the infographics are terrific.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. And the questions I had were answered right away with Councillor Frizzell, and anything else that I could think of, I'm sure is going to come back as we get this information. So I'll keep it really short. Ms. Booth and Ms. Miletus, thank you very much. I hate to admit, but I didn't actually tune in this year. But I'm going to make an effort to check out a little bit about what you're doing next year and see how it's going. So I appreciate the work you're doing. And I appreciate you pointing out Ms. Pumphrey's work, because We get inundated with so much visual information all the time, and I'm pleased to say that I recognize at least 95% of what I'm seeing on the screen here and in the report, and I've seen that before, so it's working. It's getting through, and I'm noticing it, and I know that means others are as well. So congratulations to the group, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what information comes back and seeing how we can continue to support you. And I'll make that commitment now. I'm going to try to make sure I'm available for next year's, whatever that looks like next year. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Kraus.
Well, I think it's all been said, but thank you for your incredible work in 2020, and look forward to what you bring forward in the coming years. So I look forward to the report coming back from administration and how we can continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Booth and Dr. Miletus, thank you very much. And thank you for your comments regarding Ms. Pridham, and thank you for involving my office. It was a pleasure to participate again this year, despite the fact that we couldn't open up council chambers to the public and have them come in. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll be next year. And thanks for your presentation tonight. Although your comment about Dr. Booth, when you said that when you and Dr. Miletus leave Iowa and somebody else takes over, I ignored that particular comment, if you don't mind. Sorry about that. Don't want you to leave, want you to hang around because you do a fabulous job. So thanks very much for the work you do. It is greatly appreciated. And it's interesting that it's 5 years old. It's been around for 5 years, and you have done a fantastic job, both of you, so thank you. We have the recommendation on the floor. We have it moved and seconded, so I'll call the question. All those in favor in the room? Those opposed on the phone or Zoom? Hearing and seeing no opposition, that recommendation carries unanimously, so thank you very much. And we'll have administration be in touch with you once the timing is right and let you know what we've come up with. So thank you very much again.
We appreciate your time and interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes, thank you all very much.
So our next presenters this evening are the Community Futures Fraser Fort George. Ms. Kellett, I think we have Amelia Merrick, Lead Regional Business Liaison, and Kristen Dubuck, Project Coordinator. And I hope, Kristen, I pronounced your name properly.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, but no one does, so I don't think any.
I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get started. My name is Amelia Merrick. I am the Regional Business Liaison. I believe that someone over on your side may have disabled my video, so if it's possible to turn it back on, that would be awesome. Great, there we go. Yeah. Thank you so much. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. We are really pleased on behalf of Community Futures and the businesses and the nonprofits we represent to share with you an update about our outreach program. So we've got a lot of slides here. I will ask Leslie that if I just go like this, flip the slide, that means to flip the slide.
Sounds
so
good.
We will go to the next slide. So Community Futures, some of you will already know that Community Futures has been around for a significant amount of time. We have been in the business of community-based economic renewal initiatives for the last 36 years. And our goal really is to support businesses and organizations flourish in a changing economy. If I could get the slide flipped and to the next one as well. So over the last, since the beginning of COVID, Community Futures has been working with the Northern Development Initiative Trust with funding also from Western Economic Diversification to do some in-depth research to look at how has COVID impacted the businesses and nonprofit organizations in our region across the Fraser Fort George. So we're working in Prince George, Robson Valley, and Mackenzie in an outreach program that has looked at having deep qualitative interviews, that has been doing deep qualitative interviews with more than 160 businesses and organizations across the Fraser Fort George. That is our goal. We want to listen deeply to businesses in order that we might be able to engage them collaboratively to find solutions to how COVID is impacting our region. And I'll ask you to flip to the next slide. Thank you. So this project has a robust team of folks that are working together on it. We've been working with the Aboriginal Business and Community Development Center, with municipal government partners. So that includes your own Melissa Barcelos, who has been an incredible partner and advocate and a key liaison as we've been moving forward. The Northern Development Initiative Trust, who is funding us, the Chamber of Commerce's, and the Regional District of Fraser Fort George. We've been working together collaboratively on this. Next slide, please. So we're coming to you at a point in time where we are halfway through our project, and we have conducted interviews with more than 80 businesses and nonprofits in the region. Some of you might be thinking 80 interviews, is that significant? I would like to suggest to you that that represents about 4 different PhD dissertations in terms of qualitative data. So we've got a whole lot of robust information about how our businesses are doing. As we've been going through the interviews, we use a survey guide, we transcribe everything, we enter everything into SurveyMonkey so that we're sure that we are hearing the correct story of what's happening. As we've been interviewing businesses, we've been asking, how has your context changed because of COVID? So we know that COVID has lots of different impacts, but what is the change to your business or nonprofit? How did you respond? What supports and resources have you been able to access, and has it been valuable? And what more do you need in order to flourish and survive outside of and beyond the COVID pandemic? So we've already completed 80 interviews. We've got a lot of slides here. I know you guys have a huge agenda tonight, so I'm not going to go through every single slide. And I'm going to start with a cheat sheet. So we have discovered 3 primary things that I would like to leave with you today. The first is that COVID has had a complex impact on the businesses and nonprofits that we represent, and not all businesses or types of businesses, from what we found, have been affected equally. Instead, what we've seen are new businesses, micro businesses, which are businesses with less than 5 staff, and women-led businesses have been the most significantly impacted by COVID. That's what our research has suggested. The second thing that I would like to leave you with is, for the most part, most of our businesses do remain viable, but they will only remain viable with support. If we leave them, they are going to struggle. So they are viable with support. And the third thing I'd like to leave you with is we have seen that there are 2 primary forms of support that are really mattering, that really make a difference. The first is quality funding, so good funding programs. And the second form of support is relationships. Relationships really matter in order for businesses to pivot in COVID. So those are the 3 primary cheat sheets, but I'm going to go on and we're going to go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our businesses are diverse. In our interviews, we have interviewed primarily micro businesses. We've had a greater focus on women-led businesses, but we have tried to interview a whole range of businesses. We do recognize that we have not hit our targets in terms of interviewing businesses owned by young people, businesses owned by people who are disabled, or businesses who are owned by our Aboriginal or Indigenous community members. We've interviewed businesses that are young, 1-year-old, and we've interviewed businesses that are up to 52 years old. So we've interviewed a gamut, and across all different sectors, from information, culture, recreation, professional services. You've got the list there. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have seen is that in Prince George, and this will not be a surprise to most of us, our businesses are hyper-local. So 77% of our businesses have their footprint only within Prince George. Less than 10% of them have any kind of clientele that goes into an international community. So most of our businesses are hyper-local. I say these things, and I do want to just pause for a moment. The data that I'm sharing you probably isn't very surprising. And that might be true, but what we do want to say is we now have this data, and we're able to act on data that we know has been rigorously tested and has gone through complex processes to make sure that it's true. So next slide. So if we know that 77% of our businesses are hyperlocal, we're probably not very surprised then that the biggest impact of COVID has been on foot traffic. So we asked businesses, what are the different kinds of ways that you've been affected by COVID? And primarily, our businesses are saying that they've been affected by foot traffic. More than 80% of them have said that. I want to pause there to say that this is actually particularly important for us to recognize as we are a northern community in Prince George, a much smaller center than perhaps Vancouver. And what we've been hearing from some of our businesses is that when there are health orders that come out, the consequences of those health orders are having a bigger impact on our local businesses than what we might expect. So, for instance, we know that some of our businesses are saying, I don't really understand this. I own a restaurant. When the health orders come out, I have to do the contact tracing. I have to shut down some of my booths. I need to have more space, but yet I can walk across to Winners. I can shop just like normal. Some people may or may not be using masks, and there is no contact tracing. So this is affecting our businesses in terms of their workload. We also are hearing that small businesses are being affected when we're told that we need to reduce our essential shopping. People are going to the bigger stores and are not going to our smaller businesses as much as we would expect. And because our businesses are hyper-local, we will also find that there's another challenge in that most of our businesses, or a great number of our businesses, have not been able to adapt to online mechanisms yet. So only 35% of the businesses we interviewed have remote sales or online sales options, which is far less than the average in British Columbia. So what we're seeing then is that our businesses, we know that healthy protocols are across the province, and that's fantastic. But the impact of our businesses is being felt differently than the rest of the country because of our particular context. From this, we've heard that 33% of our businesses have said that the revenues are down, and more than almost half of our businesses have said that they've got more work and more costs. So their revenues are down, the work and the costs are up. They're feeling squeezed, but they have no option to increase their prices. They feel it is, in order for me to increase my prices during a pandemic, how can I do that? And so they're being particularly squeezed. Next slide, please. The good news, is that some of our businesses are doing okay. So from our research, what we found is that 40% of our businesses are doing okay. Some of them are even flourishing. That shocked me. 20% of our businesses have said they've seen an increase in their revenue over time. Next slide, please. What we have seen is that there are some, that are just saying, we've rolled up our sleeves, we're pivoting, we're working harder, and we're finding new ways of doing things. Next slide, please. And some of the businesses, what we've also seen is that depending on the sector, some of them have been able to do better. So I'm calling them the local pleasures. They are doing better. So we know that many of us had money tucked away for our tropical vacations. We were going to head out on a cruise or go to Bermuda, but we are following health orders, which means we have money to spend back home. So businesses in construction, home renovation, recreation and outdoors, and those other delicious pleasures, candy, crafts, marijuana, and liquor, they're doing okay. But some of our businesses are really struggling. Next slide, please. In fact, 60% of our businesses are unsure of their future, and they say that they need our help. Next slide. What's really concerning is more than 50% of them, half of them, are not sure that they're going to survive the next 12 months. So we can imagine what will Prince George look like if 50% of our local businesses weren't able to survive the next 12 months. The good news again there is that we're doing better than the Fraser Fort George, but since we have a regional economy, that's not really better. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, which businesses are struggling? When we take the sector outside of it, we see new businesses, micro businesses, those small ones, and the women-led businesses. Next slide. Many of them have been accessing support, but not all kinds of support are equal. So across BC, 73% of businesses are accessing COVID-19 support. That's the same in Prince George. Awesome. except not all funding is equal. And what we've seen is that there's been an oversubscription to CERB, and businesses have been able to access really survival funding, but the higher quality funding and programs like the CEBA or the CEWS, that's the wage subsidy program, our businesses have not been able to access at equal rates as the rest of the province. Next slide. And I'm going to skip that one because it's confusing. We can talk about it later. So what we do find is that the high quality funding supports has allowed businesses to offset new expenses, to find new ways to adapt, to figure out new technology so that they can survive in the COVID environment. But many of our businesses, like I said, are only getting the CERB funding, which is really survival, which is like the EI of the pandemic, as we know. And that only allows them to pay for their bills. They can't pivot. Next slide, please. The other interesting thing, and I'm going to skip over these slides because they are a little bit cumbersome, but to say, so we found that of the businesses that are pivoting, there are two things that really matter. One is the quality of the funding, like I've already mentioned. And the second thing is the quality of relationships. Next slide, please. And so next slide, we'll just keep slipping. One more. There we go. We can stop there. That's a perfect place to stop. So what we have found is that businesses who have access to formal and informal relationships are far more able to adapt. They're able to get ideas. They're able to see how to work in the system. They're able to figure out how to work together so that they can adapt to the COVID market. You know, that's why I think Annie Booth's presentation just earlier is such a valuable one, because that's a real place where people are able to build relationships and to see how they can use their collective network to adapt even in this COVID-19 environment. All right, next slide. And one more. So what we have found in our research, we boiled it down to what we're calling 12 wicked problems that are impacting our community's ability to be resilient in COVID. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but I would like to invite you to have a look at them and see if they resonate. We can go 2 more slides. And one more, and we'll go one more slide, actually. And in closing, what I really do want to say is what we have seen in our research is that businesses are as diverse as the people that we are working with. We know that 40% of businesses are doing okay, and that's awesome, but 60% of them are not, and they need our help. We know that in Prince George, we really want to be a model for sustainable Canadian cities. We want to be healthy, supporting a robust economy, having an enviable quality of life for residents. That's what we say in the MyPG. We know from our research that funding is important, but so are relationships. We know that in the MyPG plan, it says that we want to build strong supportive networks of communities and coworkers. And our data shows that that's good, not just for mental health, but also for our businesses. And so in closing, what we do want to say is Community Futures is here to continue to work with the City of Prince George. We're working with Melissa Barcelos, but we want to continue to expand that and find more ways that we can support our communities so that they don't just survive. We want those 50% who are on the margins to survive, but we believe that this is a place that can really flourish. We've got great businesses, so let's continue to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amelia and Kristen. Greatly appreciated the presentation. I don't have anybody in the queue, but what I would say is when you talk about partnerships, it's absolutely key that you have this great partnership with the City of Prince George, particularly Melissa and her team in our Economic Development Office. They have a great handle on what's going on from an economic development perspective here. The work they do with Development Services Department, I think, is really key to a lot of the things that we're seeing in the city, particularly around development. So great to hear that you've got that partnership with that particular department. So thank you very much. And we have the study, so we're going to be able to go through it. I was very interested in the 80 interviews that you conducted and taking a look at the cross-section and diversity of those interviews. I think it really lends to some very, very important information coming out of those interviews that tell us a lot more about our smaller businesses in the community. So thank you for that. So once again, thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciated. And I know it's not the same as being face-to-face, but hopefully your next update will put you here in council chambers, which is what we would absolutely prefer. But we are where we are with the pandemic, so Zoom works. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, if we could go to D1, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Delio to give us a little refresher and a little guidance. Mr. Delio, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had our budget meetings on January 25th and January 27th, and we pretty much accomplished everything we needed to with the financial plan that night. We made all of our decisions on the service categories, but there are two pieces that were left for a later date, which is tonight, to give some extra consideration. One was the police protection service enhancement that was put forward, and the other was the fiscal services service category. And we left this one because we were trying to determine how much of the Safe Restart money would be used. And that's still the decision that also needs to be made tonight. So we have Superintendent Wright in the gallery tonight to be able to speak to the service enhancement, should Council have any additional questions. And then we are here to help you through the fiscal services if you need it too.
Thank you very much. I've already got folks in the queue. Do we have a slide that outlines and is a refresher to the police protection service enhancement?
Yes, that's
Thank you. Okay.
I'll get in the queue as well, Your Worship, please.
Okay. I have Councillor Sampson, Ramsey, Frizzell, McConaughey, and Skaken.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this, and I appreciate that the RCMP piece is up on the screen, but I'm going to get on that topic later and going to focus first on the financial plan, if that's okay in my comments. It's interesting. I didn't go into the budget process expecting that we'd have this additional time to think about this, but in turn, I've actually valued the extra time we've had to mull over the implications that our tax levy is going to have and how we're going to use those Safe Restart funds or how we're not going to use those Safe Restart funds. So it's been a sleepless 2 weeks, kind of going through all the options and trying to really figure out what the impacts are to our city as a whole. So yeah, I'll get right to it. I think looking at it, we've gotten brought back in front of us from the recommendation of the Finance and Audit a 2% tax increase. And we've seen what that does, and we've gone ahead and we've approved the budget as it is. I think, very little or no changes through the budget process, meaning that we have, a significant implication in front of us for the tax levy and what can potentially be passed on to the taxpayer. And so I believe that 1 or 0% could be seen as a good option of meeting the call from the public. We've seen a tremendous amount of feedback. I think it's over 60% of the public saying on our survey saying that they would like to see a 0% option. That's a large number of our population that we can't just ignore those calls. And although I think in a perfect world, a lot of people would say every year that they would like to see a 0%, I think we also saw such a massive increase in our respondents this year on our survey for a reason. I think it was partially to do with the way that we got the survey out there and the work that Mr. Van Anderkom and his team did, but I think we also see an increase in people just actively seeking out ways that they can give that input and they can give that feedback to council and to the city, and so that can't go ignored. I think I've been asking for a 0% option every year since I've been on council, just as an option. I believe that's the starting point of where we look at. And honestly, I never actually thought that we would necessarily pursue a 0% option. I always wanted it to be the starting point so we can go from there and look up rather than always starting at a point of inflation. But realizing that inflation is inevitable, unless we want to cut services, we're not going to see a 0% being a viable option. Until this year, when we're seeing a mass call for this, and we're seeing the Safe Restart funding being a potential option for us to pursue. So I guess to get down to it, after a lot of humming and hawing, I think the harsh reality is that going with a 0 or a 1 is going to be kicking the can further down the road. However, I think that there's a number of residents, maybe not all of us, but a number of residents who need that helping hand this year. They need that little bit of a break, even if it means that we're going to have to realize these increases down the road, whether it's next year or the following year or the year after. So if we're able to provide a bit of a break by using some of these Safe Restart funds, I think it's imperative we consider that, because I think there's a lot of people in our community who need a break this year. Maybe not all of us, but there's a number of people who do. But I want to be clear that I'm not thinking for a second that this is not creating a potential issue down the road, whether next year or the year after. We're going to see tough budget conversations and either service cuts or big tax increases, I think, in future years, unless we really find other ways to sharpen our pencils. This is a one-time funding source, not an ongoing source of funds. And so this is a one-time fix. But anyways, Your Worship, with that, that's kind of my reasoning behind where I'm at. I've done a lot of thinking on this, and I'd like to move that we consider a 0% tax increase for the city of Prince George this year.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Kraus.
Second.
And Your Worship, that's where I'm at. So I'll happily hear from my colleagues, but that's what I'm looking to pursue this year. Thanks.
So I think what we'll do as we move through this, we have the recommendation that we'll get back to. The recommendation has been moved and seconded, is on the floor for discussion. I think, Ms. Conley, what we'll also do, if council chooses to comment on recommendation 1, which is the police protection piece as well. So I'll give some flexibility there to be able to speak about, because it is a package. There's no question about it. So I have Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Frizzell, Councillor McConaughey, Councillor Skaken, and Councillor Everett, and Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Your Worship. And thanks for Councillor Sampson for starting off the discussion and putting something on the floor. I spent a lot of time looking at, doing my homework, crunching the numbers, and looking as far down the road as I can, because COVID isn't just impacting us this year, it's going to impact us next year as well, and possibly even the year after. We don't really have a crystal ball to see what the future is going to look like. I think about us kicking this down the road further and how it's just going to snowball. We just approved a 2.7% tax levy for snow, roads, and general infrastructure reinvestment. Now we have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. If we use the Safe Restart grant as a funding source to a permanent budget line, we're kicking this forward to next year, period. We just cut $4.6 million in expenses between aquatics, arenas, entertainment, events, and parks. $4,662,320 in expenses we just cut. We lost $5.7 million in revenue. To reopen facilities next year, we are going to have to build that $4.6 million back into the budget. So I do have some questions to Mr. Dalio. I feel like we have trimmed the fat as much as we can without drastically altering service levels. Would you say that's accurate?
Very much so. We're down 40 FTEs from last year, which is about approximately $4 million from the salary budget. So there's been substantial cuts, and yes, the intent was always to not adjust the service levels.
And would you say it's accurate that we're going to have to spend a significant amount of money, perhaps that $4.6 million that we just cut, to reopen facilities, hire staff back for facilities that have been closed, and unlikely that those revenues will bounce back as fast?
Yeah, so it'll cost the expenses to reopen facilities that are closed. The revenue, that's sort of subjective. It's hard to say how fast it will bounce back, but yeah, instinctively, I feel like it might not come back right away.
And if we use the Safe Restart funds to go to zero, is there some possibility that with reopening facilities, without reducing service levels, and without seeing revenues climb as quickly, that we could possibly be looking at upwards of a 6% tax levy next year?
It's hard to pin down an exact number like that, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. Depending on inflation and how it looks. Typically, the city sees between a 2% and a 3% tax increase in a year. Typically, that's probably our average. So you're right, if we were to do a zero tonight, it's that 2.7 that we've approved, and we're paying with a non-renewable funding source would be added to whatever the next year would be. So if it's another 2.5%, for example, you'd be in excess of 5 the next year as your basic starting point, basically.
Thank you. That's what I thought. And finally, I went back and looked at last year's variable tax rate structure report. And it said the representative home for 2019 was about $302,000 and paying about $2,200 in taxes. What would you say each percent of the tax levy, how it impacts that representative home, that tax bill? It seems to be around $23 a percent.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty much exact. I remember it being between 20 and 25.
So if we went with a 1%, the representative home bill would be impacted by about $25-ish, not including the additional third parties that we collect taxes for who might have seen changes.
Provided that the tax rate structure that's in place would be roughly the same as last year, and yeah, I think that's a reasonable estimate to use.
Thank you. You know, it's been a hard year for everyone, and I've been really struggling with this. You know, if we use more than 1/3 of the Safe Restart grant to help carry some of the burden of this year, we're still going to see that 2.7% tax levy next year. It's going to come back to haunt us. The remaining funds, I'm pitching a 1%. So, you know, we don't have to use it all this year. We don't have to try and get to zero this year. I get that people really want to see a zero, but a 1% this year could mean that we're shaving 1% off next year's tax levy. And that, I think, is really important because we don't have a crystal ball, but we do have these Safe Restart funds, which are a safety net. And perhaps that's the next best thing. Inflation for 2020 was 1%. You know, my fear is that if we don't at least cover inflation, we're going to be playing catch up for years to come, dipping into savings like the Safe Restart funds, and then the Fortis money to cover operational gaps. And then we're going to be slammed with that $15 million infrastructure reinvestment gap staff keep telling us about. And we're going to have to make even more tough decisions. To me, it feels unfair to taxpayers to burden them with a 5 or 6% tax levy next year. 1% today means that we are saving 1% in the future. And I think slow and steady wins the race for me. It's about making sure we're all getting there together. And I hope that I've created an argument that persuades some of you. 1% is not ideal, especially in a tough year. I recognize this 100%. But political courage is sometimes about making unpopular decisions, and I believe that it's the right thing to do. So with that, I would like to amend the motion on the floor that council approve a 1%.
Second.
And thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, and thank you to Councillor Sampson for getting us started, and to Councillor Ramsey for her eloquent and detailed explanation of where we're at and where we're going to. A few questions to Mr. Dalio. The comparator municipalities, we often talk about those. What do our comparator, have any of the other comparator municipalities come in with their tax rates for this year?
I've looked up a few of them, and provided that what I find on the internet is correct. Some of our comparators are Kamloops, Kelowna, Victoria, Nanaimo, Chilliwack, Maple Ridge. These are some of the comparators that we use. In that order, I guess, Kamloops is proposed as 0.49%. In the article that I read, they've used approximately half of their Safe Restart monies to get there. Kelowna is at 4.04%. Victoria simply says information will be available in the spring, so they're not far enough along in their process yet. Nanaimo is at 3%. Chilliwack is at 2.99%. Maple Ridge is at 3.6%, and just for interest's sake, I looked up Vancouver, and they're at 5%.
Thank you. Almost all of them, with the exception of Kamloops, sound like their rates are at a much higher than we're even considering. And thank you to Councillor Ramsey for getting to what a representative household would look like. So if we went with the 1% amendment, this is $60. This is an additional $60, but what it represents is being able to have money in case we get another pothole in the middle of Massey and have to spend $1 million there. If we get another crisis, another emergency need, or if we just want to reopen more arenas and get more activities going, that's what this money is laid out for. The kicker, I think, is the concept we hear back from time to time about borrowing from our kids. And if we kick the tax increase further down the road, it's not going anywhere. It's just accumulating over time. In fact, what we could do is we could borrow against the Terracin money that's coming. And for the next 6 years, councils could have 0% increases and spend through this Safe Restart money and spend through that $25 million. And at the end, those percentages would still add up. And the council of that day would have to have a 13 or a 16, or depending on inflation, maybe a 23% increase. The percentages don't go away. This 2 weeks ago, we approved operating expenditures of $139 million. Next year, it's probably going to be 141 or 142, depending on how the world changes. So those percentages, math is cruel. The equations here are cold, and they're not paying attention to people. But if we kick these increases down the road, they're going to come back. And what we're offering in return really isn't 0% change to the budget. What's being discussed is a 0% change to the levy. And we all know it won't be exact, but that's $60 per percentage. And yes, relief is good, but if we're going to offer relief, I think we should offer some more solid relief, like having $6 million when that rainy day comes. So with that in mind, the final thought I'll give is there's been a lot of talk about the provincial restart monies, and provincial restart monies were $3 million. This is a federal provincial grant. The federal government really quarterbacked this thing. So I want to make sure that the Todds and Bobs of the world get as much recognition as the Shirley Mikes and Johns of the world. This is both of our fellow orders of government that contributed. So I guess a final note is that if the amendment passes and then the final motion gets brought forward, then we still have to wade through what's going to happen with the enhancement. So all the cards are still on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Councillor McConaughey, followed by Councillor Skaken. Councillor McConaughey.
Sorry about that, Mayor Hall. I thought I had one more ahead of me. My apologies. Good discussion so far by my council colleagues, and I really appreciate it. And I'll stick to the matter at hand, being that that's the motion that is currently on the floor. Look, people are still going to be paying taxes. The debate tonight is whether there will be an additional percentage increase on what that dollar amount is going to be. And I'm always mindful and appreciative of my friend and council colleague, Councillor Scott, because she said over the past few years that we've served together that regardless of how many levels of government we pay taxes to, every taxpayer has just one wallet. And we're fortunate that in the middle of this pandemic, that the province has returned a small percentage of that one wallet back to the municipal level so that we might ease the burden on taxpayers at this level. To take half of those funds to do so, it really is a no-brainer to me. And to not seize this opportunity would be incredibly short-sighted. We're managing tax dollars, and I think we really need to read the room. We're arguably at the halfway mark of a global pandemic, and we need a break. Half now leaves half for next year, and we don't even know where we're going to be after that, other than we'll continue to work together to address the issues at that time. If there's a necessary increase next year or the year after, well, we're going to do this hard work again and again. We're going to go line by line, and we're going to work hard to find the balance between acceptable service levels and the funds that are required to fund it. There's a balance between planning ahead with the danger of getting too far ahead of your skis. I support a 0% increase at this time based on that argument.
Thank you, Councillor McConaughey. Thank you. Councillor Skaken, followed by Councillor Everett.
Well, thank you, Worship, and I appreciate Councillor Sampson's motion there. I've supported 0% from the start. We're not just talking about homeowners hurting, Your Worship. We heard earlier from Community Futures about the businesses. The businesses will be paying more than $23 per 1% tax increase. And then there's industry. We're talking about undue hardship that this community has faced and will face throughout this year, Your Worship. And I think they're looking to us for leadership. You know, and we look at a number of things that's happened. We've had COVID. We've had, you know, some massive cost overruns on projects that have to be paid for in some way. We've taken money out of the endowment reserve to pay for some of that. I think people, they want a break, and you know, anything more than a zero, Your Worship, in these trying times is going to be too much for some people. The mental health of people has been affected. Jobs, relationships, businesses, everything has really been negatively affected. And I think for us to come in with a 0% tax increase, we have the Safe Start money, we have the Fortis money, which we're pretty sure to get, and I think, as Councillor McConaughey mentioned, you know, we will deal with the issues when it comes to budget next year. We've tightened our fiscal belts before, but at this time, I can't support anything more than a 0% increase. And I think that'll send a good message to the community. And as far as the service enhancement, I guess I'll speak on that when it comes up, but I won't be supporting that either, because that's going to increase the taxes, you know, on top of that. So again, 0% for me. I think the community, we owe it to them, and they deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skaken. Councillor Everett, followed by Councillor Scott.
Well, thank you, Worship, and I respect staff's work on the plan that they put in front of us tonight. And we've heard from, as Councillor Skaken just mentioned, the call that we had when we had the open opportunity for citizens to participate in the debate. Somebody suggested that they should give the residential folks a break and add to the business sector. But we have to remember, when we're talking about the business sector, those operations support people who work in those operations, who rent or buy houses, so they need their income. So if we just shift the tax burden over to the business community as opposed to the residential, we're not doing anybody any services. We have to remember that all of our community is in a bad spot right now, and for us to look at the 2% that we were suggested and to go to a 1%, a 0% is where people want us to be at. And I think that's a good move for us to make right now. Councillor Ramsey brought forward the suggestion that maybe we close the Four Seasons pool. If we look at the reality of what's happening out there now in our community, the virus is coming to the Northern Interior, and the cases are up here, and percentage-wise, we're at the numbers that were in the Fraser Valley on a percentage basis. So we need to keep that in mind when we're making our decisions. And when we talk about the Safe Restart money, Safe Restart means many things to many different people. It's not simply to make a project go forward. It's sometimes to be something that lets people hang on to what they've got. And my view is that it's an important decision for us to make right now for the people that are just barely hanging on. The people that can afford to make the payment of their taxes will continue to do that, and those that are working. But those that are in a crux right now need this city council to look at them and say, we're here and we're maintaining the status quo. Whatever you paid, In the past, you will pay this year. You won't have a tax increase from us. And that's my position, Your Worship. And on the enhancement, I think that goes with the same as well for the RCMP as well. We need to all look within our budgets and see what we can find in order to go forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Councillor Scott, followed by Councillor Kraus.
Thank you, Worship. And I have crunched all these numbers and looked at all of this. I have taken phone calls, emails. I have listened closely to my council colleagues, not only this evening, but through a variety of phone calls in just trying to grapple with and make sure that I'm understanding all of what's involved in this. I too feel that kicking this down the road is not the way to go. I don't think that going 1% is a 1% savings. I think it may in fact be more of a savings in the ensuing years. In the ensuing year, I believe that we have another 2 years before we are in air quotes normal, whatever that ever means again. And I can easily support and do support a 1% tax this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Kraus.
Well, thank you, Worship. And I guess at some juncture, I would like to talk about the RCMP enhancement.
Will.
Not because I guess when you probably Superintendent Wright is hearing the conversation around the table and sort of figuring out where this might be going, but I think that I really think that and I'm going to put it in here now, I guess, is that what the training that the officers need is needed all across Canada. And as the argument was indicated at previous meetings is, I'm not quite certain why, and I guess maybe Superintendent Wright could give us some ideas around that, why this isn't offered at Depot when officers get their training, or I would hope that officers get ongoing training opportunities, and why it couldn't be offered in the future to them from Depot. And I guess I'm also thinking about why would it take 2 officers and not 1 to offer a training program. So putting it all out there, I would love to support this, and probably in different times I would have. But I think in this climate and what we're experiencing right now, I just don't know how we can. And so I'd like to have a few further conversation with Superintendent Wright about it in the future, to talk about how we make sure that the officers are equipped to do the job they need to do on the streets of Prince George, but it's needed all across Canada. So what could the City of Prince George do to advocate for that service to be offered, or the training to be offered elsewhere as well? So I'll leave it at that. I think, Councillor Scott, I was good to follow Councillor Scott. I think that I think all of us have given this a lot of thought, and we've listened to lots of people, and we have listened to what people have to say. I think that Councillor Ramsey certainly gives a good argument for 1, and she's done a superb job of doing that. And I think I came into this meeting with the idea of supporting 1 or 0. And as I listened to my colleagues, I don't know how far we're kicking this down the road, because I think we're kidding ourselves. We think we're back to normal next year. I think this is going to be a lot farther down the road, and I don't know why we would have to, if restart happens, we have to throw our doors open and wait for people to come. I think the reality was we'd have a staged opening on all of our facilities and open as the demand grows. It wouldn't have to be that we would spend all of our money right at the outset. So I think there's lots of opportunity for mitigating the challenges in the future, but we're going to have to, because that's the role of council and that's the role of all of us, to acknowledge what the future looks like and what it might mean to decision making around this table. So I guess I'm ready to have those conversations, because we will be around the table at least until 2022. And I think that I'm going to support a 0. I think that I guess I've stated the reasons why. And I want to say, too, about the terrace and gas deal. Going into the future, I sure hope we're not just counting on that to spend it away. That was never the intent of that fund. I think, and when we start talking about spending that money, I would like us to go back and look at what the intent was of all the people who put it forward and all the people who voted on it. Because that's what happened. The community voted on that. And it was to build legacies and do all of those kinds of things, not just fritter it away. And maybe people saying, well, covering my taxes isn't frittering it away. But I think people voted on it because they thought that there'd be some kind of legacy left by it. So I'll just put that out there. So I'm saying I will support a zero. When you listen to individuals who don't know where this is going to end, and I guess none of us do, but we really do have to be mindful of how people are struggling. And so, and we're not at the end of this anywhere near. The North is starting to be hit even harder by COVID. And who knows where this is going to end. And I don't think, that's my concern is right now, I think people are thinking because vaccines are on the horizon, everything is okay. So people are changing their behavior. And now we're seeing an escalation in infections. So I think that we got to get the message out there. This is not done, that we're a long ways away from that. And the city will have to cope with what the future looks like when it happens. So I'll be supporting zero. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kraus. Ms. Connolly, we are past our 7 p.m. Public hearing. Do you want to speak to that? You're in the queue here.
Your Worship, I was just going to mention the time and just that I do have the applicants for the public hearing applications on the phone, and they are ready to provide a presentation when it's time. Thank you.
So what would be our normal course of action? I don't want to interrupt this conversation. Can we postpone until 7:30-ish?
Your Worship, it's within Council's discretion to continue this matter until there's a decision and start the public hearings as soon as possible thereafter, Your Worship.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Babbage. Ms. Connolly, if you would pass along my apologies, I'd like to continue with this conversation so we can finish off the budget for 2020 or 2021. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Sampson, followed by Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I really do appreciate hearing what my colleagues have to say. I think everyone's doing a lot of thinking on this, and obviously we have a lot of different perspectives, but obviously all a similar common goal of trying to do what's best. So I appreciate everyone's perspective here. I think realistically, the financial safe restart money can be used in a number of ways, and there's a lot of opinions in the public and a number of opinions I'm sure around our table about how it can be used. But I do think using half of this money, there's still over $3 million left there for next year or future years or whatever else we need to use that for, that would still be available, and we would be using half to really, I think, make a difference for residents today. But again, I'm not there's no delusion for me that we are kicking the can down the road, and we are going to have to realize these increases later. But it gives us a bit more time to sharpen our pencils and see what we can do. It gives us a bit more time to communicate with residents and see, are there areas of services that we can pull back on or do differently. And I think it is about buying some time here. So to use half of these funds to buy us some time and to give our residents and our businesses a break, I think that's a wise way to use these funds personally. So I still am supportive of the 0%, although I'm very aware of the implications, and we're going to have some hard work to do. And I do want to say that I'm not willing to commit at this time or any time in the near future the other funds to be used to lessen the tax levy next year. That's another hard conversation we have to have. And so there's no, I think, earmarking those funds that they're going to be automatically used for that. I don't want to give, at least from my perspective, the taxpayers or anybody the impression that we're going to have a zero next year by using this or whatever. This is a one-time deal, and we're going to have to see what comes of next year. But those funds might come into play here when we need to reopen some facilities. It's part of the restart model, and so we would still have over $3 million to allocate out as appropriate to make sure our community gets restarted as it needs to through COVID. But by no means am I interested in earmarking those funds at this time. And when it comes to the Fortis money, we would have to be in some pretty dire straits for me to want to use those monies for alleviating the tax levy increase ever. I think that's my impression of those funds is to use something that is tangible for the city to benefit from in the long haul. So I really would not want to go to that degree, but I think it's our responsibility to find ways to offer some refuge, I guess, for those who need it in our community, and we're able to do that this year with the 0%, although marginal for some, maybe is a really big difference for others, and if we can do that, I think it's the right thing to do. So just a question, Your Worship, is the motion that I made for 0 now amended to be 1%? Is that what is on the floor?
The amendment on the floor is for 1%, so we would deal with the amendment and then, correct Ms. Conley, go back to Councillor Sampson's recommendation.
That's correct.
I understand. Thank you very much for the clarification. Again, I'll be supporting the 0%, and although I appreciate the 1, I just think at this point it's 6 1 half does the other. At that low of an increase, we're able to help people with that little bit more, and I think that's important. So thanks, Your Worship. I'll be supporting 0, and I won't be supporting the amendment. Thanks.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Frizzell.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thinking about this discussion, I think about that, Set for Life lottery, where you can win $25 or $25 million now or $1 million a year for the rest of your life. And, I'm likening that scenario to the tax levy this year, and that there's no right answer. It really comes down to philosophy. It's, what each of us think is best for the city. Councillor Sampson nailed it, saying, six a dozen of one or half of the other, whatever the expression is, in that, if we go 0% this year, it's going to get tacked on to next year. If we go 1% this year, it's going to subtract it from next year. This year, next year, possibly the year after are all tied to one another because of COVID. So, we each have our own different outlooks. There's no right answer to COVID and to budgeting during a pandemic. It's just really, doing what we think is right. I just happen to think that 1% is the right way to go because we don't have that crystal ball, but perhaps we could have a safety net that has $1 million more in it. So I guess my question through to Mr. Dalio is about the interest we could possibly earn on $1 million. So if we did go with a 1% tax levy, that would mean $1 million now, but it would mean more than $1 million next year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. Although I wouldn't say it would be a large dollar figure. Our investments are restricted, being that we have public funds. We're restricted in what we're allowed to invest in. For example, we couldn't go all in on GameStop or something like that. But we have a very modest return, and especially in the pandemic, it's been even more modest. So it would maybe match the usual inflation if we were lucky.
So it's not a lot, but every penny helps in a pandemic. So, if you are on the fence, some food for thought is that, if we do charge a 1% this year, it will have, a compounding interest that might help us a little bit more next year. FNA came out with 2%. We looked at the numbers. 2% made sense. We would be using some of the Safe Restart funds and have some remaining money left over for future years. Some are saying 0 is the way to go, and I'm proposing that we meet in the middle at 1%. And it's at the end of the day, it's going to get tacked on the next year if we go with 0, but I'm just hoping that we can lessen the burden for next year, because I don't think we're going to be out of this next year. I think that we are going to be looking at the ripple effect of this pandemic on our budget for years to come. And, it's easy to say, okay, well, we can strategize later, but we can also strategize now. We can look at how this is going to impact next year and make a conscious decision. Yes, people might, get really frustrated and hopefully not do bad things to us, but sorry for that. But I just think that in the long run, this is just going to help us more than hurt us. We heard from staff that we're possibly looking at 5 or 6% next year if we don't make impossible choices. I I know snow's a big deal. We saw in citizen budget, people do not want snow service levels changed. I don't want to have to lay more people off than we already have. We are going to have to reopen facilities. We are going to have to spend money. I've proposed that we close the Four Seasons Leisure Pool because that's the only place I could find. I went through this budget line by line by line. We are going to have to make drastic service cuts next year. That's period. And this is 1% can perhaps help us a little bit more next year from having to make impossible choices. We've already made impossible choices. None of us like this. This is the worst term ever. It's the hardest term ever. It's a hard first term. So I'm putting in the pitch one last time. I hope some bites are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. It's hard to believe some of the things that were just said, in particular that it's her first term, because the wisdom and the knowledge and the insight that Councillor Ramsey brings are extraordinary. And that's why I'm 100% behind her. I agree that 2 weeks ago, we approved expenditures of $139 million. We approved spending 2.7% more when our revenues are down. We're not getting casino money. We're not going to be getting money coming in from a variety of sources all over. We approved that the budget would go up 2.7%, and now we're trying to make budget by spending a one-time amount, and it just doesn't, it doesn't seem right, and it seems a bit misleading to say that we're giving a break when, in fact, that percentage just piles on to next year. I think when we approved 2.7%, there was one person who came back and said, here's a way to cut back that operating expense, and that was Councillor Ramsey again. And if we wanted to cut back 2.7%, we had our chance. We went through that line by line by line, all of us together, and we didn't. We didn't cut back any of the expenditures. We added some on top of it. So we're going to have rainier days ahead, and I think that the idea of 1%, we should be saving the whole thing, but the 1% that Councillor Ramsey has proposed is a great compromise, and I really urge you to consider what she's proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just one more addition. I don't want to be misleading and at all, and I'm under no delusion that we're putting this off in the future, but what we are able to provide this year is a break, and there's no doubt about that. If we go with zero, it is a break. It is providing some aid, and I 100% agree, and I'm the one who said it time and time again during the budget process, which was if we take out $2 million from this budget line, it's going to have to go back in later when we open the pools. That's kicking it down the road, and I recognize that, and we're going to have some hard conversations to have. But I want to put it there. I don't want to be misleading to anybody in the public. This is going to catch up with us, and we are going to have to look at it. As long as we continue to stay on this, I think we're going to be able to mitigate that to a degree and continue to work on trying to make sure it's palatable in the future, whether that is a 2, 3, 4, 5% increase. We're going to have hard conversations, and we're going to have to get there, and we're going to have to inform people well in advance and educate them along the way as to why that's happening. But I think there's a means of getting there, and I think we will. I know we will. We'll have to. That's our job. But I think it's not to be misleading. This is a one-time break. This is a one-time injection of funds. It's not a new ongoing funding source. It's not a revenue stream, and this is a one-time aid for those who really need it. There are people in our community who do not need a 0%. They are able to pay their taxes, and they're going to be fine if we go with a 2%, a 5%, or whatever it's going to be. But there are people who are really struggling, and if we're able to help those people, I think it's imperative that we do that this year. We have the means to do so directly in front of us, and then we just need to be working hard over this next 12 months on how we're going to make next year happen, and how we're going to make the following year happen, and how we're going to set the next council up for success as well, because it's not just about us. It's about the next council and the next council and making sure that there's financial stability in the city as a whole. So my commitment is that if we're offering a break now, that we're going to work hard to make sure that we have a palatable option or tax levy increase or zero or whatever it looks like next year, and I'll work hard for that. But I'm not willing to commit any amount at this time. I just want to commit that I'll work hard this year to make sure that it's something that the residents can manage. But I'll be supporting the zero. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through to Mr. Dalio, something was said in all of this, and I just want to go back and ensure that the Safe Restart funding or the Safe Restart funds are maintained separate and distinct from council or from city operating budget.
So when this money was granted to us from senior government, they had criteria as to what we could spend it on and criteria on how we report on it. So it has to have its own separate information in our financial statements, and so that we can show how it's been spent since we received it. So yes, this is separate from our operations to maybe help everyone sort of understand what I think we're all discussing tonight is to use half of the money this year. We would then look at next year's budget and basically start $3 million in the hole and have to figure out how to fill that $3 million. And maybe the answer for next year is to use the other half of the money and we plug the hole for one more year. But we are if we were looking at a 0%, we're basically committing to 2-year use of this money, provided that we don't make service changes or other cuts of some substance, if that helps.
It does entirely, because I'm struggling with zero on the basis that it is at least a 2-year commitment. And I just can't go there. I honestly think that 1% is the reasoned way to be. I'm not going to kid myself that the 5 people that have spoken so passionately are going to be swayed by me, but they ought to be swayed by the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nobody else in the queue. As everybody has said around the table, this is a huge struggle for each and every one of us to try to come up with the number. Every year it's about the number. Is it 2.7? Is it 2? Is it 0? What does that look like? We've heard loud and clear that people are saying we need the break this year. It's absolute necessity that we need the break this year. As Councillor Frizzell has said, we have committed to the budget. We didn't do any service cuts. We increased the snow removal budget. The terrace and gas piece, never did I ever consider the terrace and gas dollars as being used for this. This was a commitment by residents of the city some 2 decades ago to use these dollars for certain things in our community, and that commitment is still there from my perspective. For me, we're talking about 0 or 1%, the difference of about $1.1 million. Are we kicking things down the road? There's no question if we go with 0. If we go with 1, we're kicking things down the road as well. Every opportunity and every person that I've spoke to has said every little bit will help. It will help on the utilities that we're going to talk about in a moment, and the deadline and the implication of not meeting the deadline. We'll have a conversation about that. I'm going to support the 0%. And I think the argument has been made very well by Councillor Frizzell and Councillor Ramsey about kicking it down the road, and I get that. I know that we are going to have to do substantial work over the next while to make sure that the 2022 budget takes us into consideration. I want to go back to what Mr. Dalio said about the $6.1 million restart money. We fought hard for that. FCM worked hard for that. The feds and the province worked together on that. It was important for us. We talked about the fact that we needed restart dollars because we knew we were going to be in a bind, losing millions of dollars worth of revenue. I'm not thinking for a moment that we're going to open up the Civic Center or we're going to open up the pools and we're going to get back to the revenue pieces that we saw over the years, there's no illusion on my part that we're going to see that this year. I agree with many of you around the table when you talk about the fact that we're going to go into 2022 in much the same position. God forbid. I'm hoping that in September or October, we're planning for huge events in 2022. I hope we're planning on having concerts. I hope we're planning on having revenue-generating opportunities, not just for the city, corporately, but for the entire community. Hoteliers, restaurateurs, people running small business. We had a presentation tonight from Community Futures. 60% of our businesses are suffering. 40% are doing okay. Do we have an opportunity tonight to look at a 0% tax increase for these folks? And personally, I think we do. We've heard that loud and clear from the chamber, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm prepared, and I think we all are prepared, to take a look later on in 2021 as to what we can do in 2022. And I think service delivery is a big piece of this. What does it look like in the late fall this year about service delivery around all of our recreation facilities, around service delivery from roads, snow clearing, all of it. Let's take a look at it. I have heard this evening about the Four Seasons pool. Probably not a lot of dollars there if we keep that closed now forever and a day until the new pool opens, but I think that's a conversation we have to have. What's there in the bucket for us to take from if we shut down the Four Seasons pool? We've already passed and decided that we're going to keep it closed for 2021. What is the point in opening up for 6 or 8 months in 2022 before we open the new pool? So there's all of those pieces that I think we need to have those conversations about, and we'll get there. We absolutely will get there. So I have Councillor Skaken in the queue, and I'll go to him in a moment, but I want to thank all of you. You've made passionate pleas and passionate arguments for a 1 or a 0%, and I appreciate that, and I think obviously we've got some work to do. But I will be supporting the 0% increase. Councillor Skaken.
No, it's too late. I tried to get in earlier, so I'm out.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the queue? Seeing none, we have the recommendation, the amendment on the recommendation that Councillor Ramsey put forward and Councillor Frizzell for a 1% increase. All in favor of that recommendation in the room, please. Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Frizzell, Councillor Scott. Those opposed in the room, Councillor Sampson, Hall, Kraus, and Everett. And those opposed on Zoom or phone?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Opposed from Councillor McConaughey, Councillor Skaken. So that recommendation fails 6-3. Now back to the original motion that was put forward by Councillor Sampson, seconded by Councillor Kraus. All those in favor of a 0% increase in the room? Councillors Everett, Kraus, Hall, Sampson. Those opposed on the phone or Zoom? And I will go to those in favor on the phone and Zoom.
In favor.
In favor of 0.
Those opposed in the room? Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Frizzell, and Councillor Scott. That carries 6-3. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Connolly, we have the, was discussed a bit. It was the recommendation on the Police Protection Service enhancement. If we could go to that.
I'll get in the queue.
Okay, I want to tidy up this if we could. Okay, Councillor Skaken on the enhancement.
Well, thank you, Worship. I'm going to say some time. I'm not going to get in the queue a number of times here. I'm not going to support the enhancement. If you look at what the people are doing across our province, they're being innovative. I think on January 12th, Interior Health and the RCMP formed a working group to deal specifically with mental health issues and how police officers deal with mental health issues on the job. I think there's opportunities to do it internally. I think there's opportunities to do like Interior Health. So I think the RCMP at this point, I can't put forward any support for spending what I think is going to work out to about $300,000 next year. I appreciate that there needs to be mental health training for the RCMP, but I think it's got to come from the federal, the federal support. I don't think we should pick up the tab here. And there's also the opportunities, like I said, to work with the health authorities to come up with some homegrown solutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Kraus.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've given a lot of thought to this enhancement, and I just want to commend Superintendent Wright for the effort that you put into this. It is really innovative, and I think that you care a lot about our city, and it shows because this. I know it would make a huge difference. There is the question, though, whether or not this is training that should be provided to us in the $28 million that we pay for every year. And I just, we just saw council support a 0% tax levy. I cannot, in good conscience, support an enhancement with a tax levy at 0. So I will not be supporting this enhancement. I do think that there's some advocacy work that can be done, and I would love perhaps if we could refer this back to intergovernmental resolutions to perhaps work on a resolution to UBCM, to NCLGA, UBCM, perhaps even FCM, to have this sort of training covered and provided for. So that's kind of where I'm at. I would love to see us do advocacy work and then perhaps consider it again in the future when it's not a tough tax year, which I don't know when that's going to be. Thank you so much for the work you put on this.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Kraus, followed by Councillor Sampson.
Well, thank you, Worship. And I, too, would like to commend Superintendent Wright for the initiative. At the right time, it would be absolutely the right thing to do. And so, but I guess I stated my case before, so I guess my response at this time is no, unfortunately. Thanks.
Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I'll also say the same. Thank you very much, Superintendent Wright. You put a lot into this, and it's very clear, as Councillor Ramsey said, that you care a lot about Prince George and you care a lot about advancing what policing means in our communities. Especially here in Prince George, and trying to provide a top-notch service here. I mean, from my perspective, it's really appreciated that you're looking at those opportunities. I do struggle with trying to define that line of being downloaded costs from other levels of government. Perhaps I do feel like this should be taken into consideration at the federal level. This is not a municipal police force, and I think there's a lot of benefits to it not being a municipal police force. We get the expertise of the RCMP, one of the most respected police forces around the world, and that's a huge benefit to us. But we need to continue to push the RCMP to making sure that the right training practices are in place, and they're providing all the tools and resources needed to those officers that they're contracting to our community. A positive note is we actually had an Intergovernmental Resolutions Committee meeting just last week. Councillor Scott and Councillor Skaken and myself were on that committee, and we've invited Superintendent Wright, who's agreed, and he's going to come to one of our future meetings here, and we have a lot of work to do in that area. So not just on the training piece, but we're going to be having conversations on a number of different things on how we can continue to advocate with the RCMP and look to other levels of government for supports and funding. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation with the superintendent and our committee, because I think there's a lot of great work that can be done. We're going to follow up on some previous resolutions that Council passed as well that included the RCMP, and so I know Councillor Skaken and Councillor Scott and myself are really looking forward to that committee meeting, and obviously welcome the rest of Council to join us if you wish. I won't be supporting it today. It's hard to say that. I do think it's a great initiative. I just think it's a tough time for us. And I do strongly believe that this should be a federally regulated training program, and I'm gonna commit that I'll work hard to pursuing that advocacy work with you, Superintendent Wright, and with my colleagues. So we'll get there, hopefully just across Canada. And if there's future opportunities to better the policing in Prince George, please don't hesitate to bring them, because I think it's in the best interest of our community and all of us to hear those ideas from you. So thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Superintendent Wright. It's the year. This is not a good year for our city in terms of finance, and we have to make this choice. And I support what my colleagues have said. we will live to continue all of these items in some way, but not through this process. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor McConaughey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall. And my council colleagues have certainly articulated themselves very well. And I agree with much of the words that have been shared. Superintendent Wright, timing is everything. And the timing tonight, right now, it couldn't be worse. It has nothing to do with the justifiable argument behind the initiatives that you've posed. They are necessary. And from what I've interpolated from the report is that the training exists currently kind of between traveling south and then a mandatory training in Prince George on the ground through seconded staff. But, and I understand the desire to ramp that up with dedicated training in our city. Perhaps something to be seen in the future. The part of the argument was that the investment of that $365K, that dedicated team rather, in the city would save money in overtime, travel expenses, that perhaps there's an opportunity to share a dedicated training team with other communities and cost sharing. So it would be good to see those explored and brought to us so that we're not just seeing the expense category, but we're also seeing some of the offset revenues, some of the partnerships that have been investigated and perhaps secured. Just those kinds of things, I think, would give council a much better place to fully deliberate. So just food for thought. I'm happy that Councillor Sampson and the Intergovernmental Relations team will be dedicating time also, because as Councillor Krause said, there's a space at that table for this initiative also. So even though it's a no in the budget this time around, I think you've actually covered some ground, and this is actually moving forward, and perhaps it'll be more fruitful than if it had just landed here tonight. So, and in closing, I just want to thank you, Superintendent, you and your team, all the members, for their dedication in our city. It's a tough job. It's one I'm woefully underqualified to ever do. And I just appreciate that you guys do. Thanks very much, Mayor Hall.
Thank you. Councillor McConaughey, I have nobody else in the queue. Council, we have a recommendation at, sorry, let me just move back here. Recommendation at D1, and I'm wondering, Ms. Connolly, if that recommendation shouldn't read, consider approval of the police protection services rather than just consider?
That would be in order, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. If I could have a mover and a seconder on that. Councillor Scott, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Krause, nobody in the queue. All in favor of recommendation 1 that council approve the police protection service enhancement as presented. All those in favor in the room? Those opposed on the phone? And
opposed.
And sorry, Zoom?
Sorry, Mayor Hall, my apologies. What is the motion on the floor?
The motion on the floor is to approve the police protection service enhancement.
I would be opposed.
Thank you. So 2 opposed, all those opposed in the room. Motion is defeated. Thank you. Mr. Dalio, I'm going to turn to you now for recommendation number 2, and then council will need to take a recourse here on our agenda and move to the public hearing, which we've kept now for about 40 minutes. So,
thank you, Your Worship. I'll try and go fast. So,
no, take your time.
The second recommendation, in order for me to do this, there's perhaps a few resolutions just to do the process piece and dot the I's and cross the T's. I have them all written out just in case. So the first one would be that and I realize we already dealt with this in January, but this is again just that last process piece, that the 2021 Human Resources Operations Expenditures line in the Human Resources Service category of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan be increased from $1,576,147 to $1,591,147. That's to remind everyone that was the $15,000 that we approved to put back for the wellness program. So that would be the first resolution I'd need.
Okay. Could I have a motion on that, please? Councillor Councillor Everett and Councillor Frizzell. All those in favor of the resolution in the room? Those opposed on Zoom and on phone? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two more to go. That the 2021 taxes general revenue line in the fiscal services service category of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan be changed from a credit of $98,830,367 to a credit of $96,568,927. And this is showing the reduction of the tax levy for the revenue that we'll be using Safe Restart for.
So that's a Safe Restart dollars that we're using.
Yeah, the next two resolutions deal with the shift of the restart money to the levy figure.
Okay. Could I have a a mover and a seconder, Councillor Kraus, Councillor Everett. All those in favor in the room on that resolution? Those opposed in the room? Councillor Ramsey is opposed. Those opposed on phone or Zoom? That motion is carried 8-1.
Thank you, Your Worship. And last one, again, same topic, just different line in the fiscal services. That the 2021 taxes general transfers line in the fiscal services service category of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan be changed from a credit of $796,185 to a credit of $3,072,625. And that's exactly what it sounds like, Your Worship. This is saying exactly how much Safe Restart money we're going to augment our budget with this year.
Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder on that one, please? Councillor Sampson, Councillor Kraus, all in favor of that recommendation in the room? Opposed in the room? Councillor Ramsey is opposed. Opposed on the phone or on Zoom? Seeing none and hearing none, that motion is carried 8-1. So, Mr. Dalio, you have recommendation 2.
Maybe I'll ask for Ms. Connolly's help, but now it might be approves the fiscal services service category as amended tonight. How would that look, Ms. Connolly?
Your Worship, I might defer to Mr. Babich on this, please.
Yes, Your Worship, that would be in order to approve the fiscal service category as amended.
As amended, given the previous 3 recommendations that we dealt with. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So we have recommendation 2 amended. Sorry, I didn't get the mover. Oh, Councillor Sampson, Councillor Everett. All those in favor in the room? Those opposed in the room? Councillor Ramsey and Councillor Scott are opposed. Opposed on the phone or Zoom? Hearing and seeing no, so Zoom and phone is taken care of. That motion is carried 7-2. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Connolly, if we could then come back to D2, tax and utility deadlines, and you, Mr. Dalio, after we do our public hearings.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first formal public hearing this evening is at item G1. It's regarding official community plan amendment application number CP 100-165, bylaw number 9154, and rezoning amendment application number RZ 100-670 for bylaw number 9155. These applications are for the property located at 9800 and 9912 Sintich Road. For this hearing, we have a staff report dated October 23rd, 2020, that was previously considered by Council at their November 9th, 2020 regular meeting. a location map, existing zoning map, Appendix A to Bylaw 9154, Appendix A to Bylaw 9155, Exhibit A to the rezoning application, and a PowerPoint presentation that was received from L&M Engineering on behalf of the applicants. No other correspondence is received. Mr. Wells is available to provide a summary of the application and staff's recommendation.
Well, before I go to Mr. Wells, I'll just declare that this formal hearing is now called to order, and we are dealing with G1, and I'll go to Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this application is to facilitate a lot line adjustment between 9800 Sintage Road and 9912 Sintage Road. To accommodate the proposed lot line adjustment, the applicant has applied to redesignate a 0.15 hectare portion of 9800 Sintage Road from rural resource to business district service commercial, and a 0.15 hectare portion of 9912 Sintage Road from business district service commercial to rural resource in Schedule B6 future land use in the OCP. The applicant has also applied to rezone a 0.15 hectare portion of 9800 Sintage Road from RM9 manufactured home park to C6LC highway commercial, and a 0.15 hectare portion of 9912 Sintage Road from C6 LC Highway Commercial to RM9 Manufactured Home Park. No negative impacts anticipated, Your Worship. This is just a lot line adjustment to correct the boundaries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells. The applicant is on the phone. And who is it this evening, Ms. Connolly?
We have Miss Ashley Elliott with L&M Engineering.
Thank you very much. Good evening. And I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Kellett, to direct us through the presentation.
Miss Elliott, are you there?
I am, yes.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Elliott. First of all, my apologies for making you wait 45 minutes to present this evening. We were into a big discussion, as you probably know, with respect to the budget. So thank you for hanging in there.
No problem. I'm just happy to be here.
And I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Ashley Elliott, and I am the planner from L&M Engineering, who will be representing this application for you. Before we get started, I just wanted to get my bearings on the visual submission. Is the presentation on the overhead monitors?
It is, Miss Elliott.
Perfect. And we'll just be able to progress through them as we go. Yeah.
You can indicate next slide, and Ms. Kellett will advance your presentation.
Okay, perfect. I will do my best to keep on track, but please don't hesitate to interrupt me if I appear to be referencing the wrong slide. I've never presented at a public hearing over the phone, so bear with me. So if we could skip to slide 2. I would like to begin by thanking Mr. Wells for the introduction and for administration's support and assistance with the file to date. The subject properties are located at 9800 Sintage Road and 9912 Sintage Road. As Council may recall, in 2019, 9800 Sintage Road was rezoned from AF, Agriculture and Forestry, to RM9 Manufactured Home Park to facilitate the development of a new land lease modular home community on the subject property. As originally proposed, the modular home community is still expected to include a community facility, a proposed park, an office for administration, and an area for showcasing new modular homes for sale. Freeport Industries remains eager to invest in the city of Prince George with this new land lease modular home community, which in turn will provide some new high-quality modular home opportunities within the city of Prince George. If we can skip over to slide 3, we see that 9800 Sintage Road is currently designated as a rural resource future land use in the OCP and is zoned RM9 Manufactured Home Park in the zoning bylaw. And 9912 Sintage Road is currently designated as a business district, service commercial, future land use in the OCP, and is zoned C6LC highway commercial in the zoning bylaw. Moving along to slide 4. We have indicated the location of a current road right-of-way dedication in black, where it bisects 9800 Sintich Road and essentially cuts the future planned modular home community in half, which would be undesirable and inconsistent with the vision for the planned community. The existing road right-of-way is proposed to be closed and incorporated into the internal road network for the future modular home community to provide access to the existing water main as shown on the next slide. So if we can skip to slide 5, you will see where, sorry, I'm skipping on my side here too, where we have shown how a land exchange is proposed between 9800 Sintich Road, the location of the future modular home community, and 9912 Sintich Road to the east, where the existing gas station and liquor store are located. This land exchange would effectively set aside the land necessary to accommodate a more efficient location for the future connector road, as indicated with the solid black line on the plan above, which would be of great benefit to both properties. A new right-of-way agreement would be registered on title to provide the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure with the ability to construct the future connector road if it is ever needed. Skipping right along to slide 6, please. We have indicated how a 0.15 hectare portion of 9800 Sintich Road, indicated in blue, is proposed to be rezoned from RM9 Manufactured Home Park to C6LC Highway Commercial and redesignated in the OCP from a rural resource land use to a service commercial land use, and how in exchange a 0.15 hectare portion of 9912 Sintich Road, indicated in yellow, is proposed to be rezoned from C6LC Highway Commercial to RM9 Manufactured Home Park and redesignated in the OCP from a service commercial land use to a rural resource land use. In summary, this proposed rezoning and OCP amendment application is necessary to facilitate a 0.3 hectare land exchange between the property owners to facilitate the relocation of the required road right-of-way dedication. On behalf of our clients, LNM would like to thank Council for your thoughtful consideration and for the opportunity to present this application tonight. As always, I am available to answer any questions that Council or the public may have. Thank you, and we can skip to the next slide to close our presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elliott. I have Councillor Frizzell in the queue, and then we'll go through the council queue, and then we'll go, Ms. Conley, to submissions and anyone on the phone. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Just if we could go back to the slide just before your farewell slide in the application. Yeah, under the blue area it says C6LC, and you reference C6LC, but in the text next to it, it says C5LC. Can you tell us the difference between C5LC and C6LC, and which of those applies? Is that just a syntax error on the slide? Is that just a misspelling?
Yeah, that's just my typo. So it is C6LC. It's the highway commercial zoning designation, and it has the L and the C for liquor cannabis, which is existing on the property.
Okay, and in the section above that, it says C5LC as well. Should that be C6LC as well?
Yep.
Okay, through to Mr. Wells. Do we have an existing C5 LC designation, and is there a C6? Is this a significance in the application?
Your Worship, this doesn't impact the application. We're showing C6 LC as ours, what the zoning bylaw shows.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Elliott, I don't have anybody else in the queue from council. Ms. Conley, anybody on the phone that would like to speak to this issue this evening?
I do not have anybody on the line, Your Worship.
Okay, Ms. Conley, do I have to go through 3 times, or am I good with that?
I think in the phone scenario, Your Worship, with these council proceedings, you're okay with calling 1 time.
Okay, so we have nobody on the phone wanting to speak to this issue, and obviously nobody in the gallery wanting to speak to this issue. So if I could get a motion to close the public hearing, please. Councillor Scott, thank you. Councillor Ramsey, all those in favor of closure in the room, opposed to closure on the phone or Zoom, Seeing no opposition, closure is carried unanimously. And Council, we have two recommendations. One is third reading, City of Prince George Official Community Plan Bylaw number 8383, 2011, Amendment Bylaw number 9154, 2020. Thank you, Councillor Sampson, Councillor Scott. All those in favor in the room. All those opposed on phone or Zoom. Seeing and hearing none, those are carried. That particular recommendation is carried unanimously. And the second one is third reading, City of Prince George Zoning Bylaw number 7850, 2007, Amendment Bylaw number 9155, 2020.
Third reading, please.
Councillor McConaughey. All those in favor in the room. All those opposed on phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Ms. Elliott, thank you very much. And again, thank you for your patience this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, G2. Ms. Connolly, it's a soil removal and deposit designation application number SR 000019 by 19, bylaw number 9102, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. For this hearing, we have a staff report that's dated December 4th, 2020, that was previously considered by Council, their regular meeting on December 21st of last year, a location and existing zoning map, Appendix A to Bylaw 9102, a hall route mapping, and two items of correspondence that were received, or dated rather, January 5th and 22nd of 2021 from the applicant, as well as a PowerPoint presentation received February 1st that is going to be on screen shortly here from the applicant. Correspondence was also received last week, February 2nd, from Philip Mayadovic, who is in support of the application. No other correspondence has been received, and Mr. Wells is available to provide a summary of the application. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. The property owner would like to amend Schedule A of the soil removal deposit bylaw to include a 12.5 hectare portion of 4117 Northwood Pulp Mill Road. This application would allow the property owner to apply for a long-term soil removal permit for the removal of approximately 687,000 cubic meters of material from the site. Administration supports the application. It's consistent with the official community plan. Your Worship, there's been a long-standing soil removal occurring on the property without the owner's permission, and this will help move things forward. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Wells. I have nobody in the queue for questions to you. Ms. Connolly, we have, is it Mr. Radloff on the phone?
Yes, Yes, Your Worship.
Good evening, Mr. Radloff. First of all, my apologies for the lateness of the public hearing, and thank you very much for your patience, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's Dan Adamson here. I work for Radloff and Associates.
Hello, Mr. Adamson. Good to hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. We'll start with the slide after the title page. The applicant has agreed to undertake neighborhood consultation over and above what is required by the city bylaw. We provided information packages out to 64 property owners and provided opportunities to comment between November 24th and December 11th. And of the 64 mailouts, we received a petition signed by 8 households opposed to the application. 3 of the petitioners also provided emails with concerns, and 1 additional resident provided an email. We were able to have follow-up conversations with 6 of the residents that provided comments or signed the petition. So we have a fairly good understanding of what the concerns were. First of all, is increased noise and dust from pit operations, increased traffic, and industrial land use within a residential neighborhood and potentially affecting the quality of the rural setting, affecting property values, and also the loss of recreation trail access through the client's private property. Next slide, please. You have a summary and discussion of the public consultation attached to your council report, Your Worship. We also provided an updated letter to the Bellamy Road residents on January 25th describing how the concerns would be mitigated. And again, you've got that letter attached to your council report. So this presentation will provide a brief overview of how the concerns raised by some of the residents will be addressed. Next slide, please. This slide should be the image of the PG map from 1993 showing what the pit looked like at that time. It has a long history and was established, next slide please, was established originally in the early 1980s when the ball diamonds were constructed across the road, and a location was needed to place the excess sand. And a designation was not needed at that time. Since then, the applicant has allowed some of the sand to be used. For example, the downhill ski club was using the sand for sandbags for their fundraising. But through the decades, many people have helped themselves to sand without the owner's approval. And he has put up trespass signs, but they often get taken down or vandalized. Formalizing a designation and subsequent soil removal permit would address unauthorized excavation of the sand. Next slide, please. This is a 2020 PG map image of the sand pit, and you can see it's pretty much the same as what was on the site earlier, in the earlier decades. Next slide, please. So first up, in terms of the concerns, I'd like to address the pit operation. What's really important about this designation is the material itself. It is used as a blending sand for concrete production, and there is a limited use for the blending sand and a limit on how much is needed annually for the concrete production. And we've had discussions with the interested pit operator, and based on the current average concrete production, they would need about 5,000 cubic meters a year, and that's the estimated annual demand out of that pit. And this volume would result in a pit operation of approximately 2 to 3 weeks per year. Next slide, please. Even doubling this annual average amount would only result in a pit operating for 1 to 1.5 months out of the year. So we think this is quite a significant development. Current practice by the concrete producer is to haul the material to the concrete plant during one period of the year. So it wouldn't be spread out over time. It makes most economic sense, business sense for them to do this over one period. So this overall significantly reduces the potential effects on the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to address the maintaining recreation access concern. So historically, many local residents use the trails passing through the applicant's private property and for hiking, dog walking, snowmobiling, and ATV use. And of course, the applicant is not obliged to provide public recreation across his private property. However, in discussions with the applicant and the interested pit operator, they are open to working with the residents and the city to develop an access agreement or an easement that would allow residents formalized access along the trail through the riparian zone, as long as the risk and liability concerns are addressed. Next slide, please. The next concern is dust. Sand within the historical pit has been exposed for decades, and there is only evidence of localized migration of sand and dust. A soil removal permit will require dust suppression measures when it's operating. In addition, a natural vegetative berm is located along Miranda Road, and that will be retained. It is actually not in the designation area. It's within the 50-meter buffer zone, and so it will be required to be retained. And this will have a large effect in terms of mitigating dust and sand migration. Next slide, please. This is a street view of the pit as it currently is today. You can see the historical sand pit. It's over 30 years old. And you can see the natural berm within the 30-meter buffer zone that will be retained. And the kind of access that you see now is the proposed access for this designation. Next slide, please. This is another street view further along Miranda Road, and this shows more of the vegetated natural berm that will be retained in place, obscuring the view in behind of the pit operation and helping mitigate noise and dust and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. The next issue was raised was noise. So heavy trucks already use Noranda Road and Northwood Pulp Mill Road, so there's already some background noise. The applicant and interested pit operator would commit to having no pit operations during weekends and holidays. Further, they would agree to reducing hours of operation that are set out in the bylaw. So they would be open to having a later start in the morning and ending earlier in the evening. In addition, equipment noise is significantly reduced because of the short annual operating period that's expected. In addition, there is no need for noisy grinding equipment typically found in gravel pits because this is a sand product. Next slide, please. The next issue raised was traffic. So as I mentioned before, heavy trucks already use Noranda Road and Northwood Pulp Mill Road. The proposed designation route is to turn left onto Noranda Road near Northwood Pulp Mill Road, and then turn onto Northwood Pulp Mill Road to access the highway. So trucks would not be allowed to go along the main part of Noranda Road or Bellamy Road. One of the safety concerns that was raised by residents is that they often use Northwood Pulp Mill Road because there is no lights at the intersection of Bellamy Road and Highway 97. And so they were concerned about increased traffic on Northwood Pulp Mill Road. However, they have requested, and I promised that I would bring this forward to council, they requested that signals be added at the Bellamy Road and Highway 97 intersection to improve safety, and therefore not having to use the Northwood Pulp Mill Road signaled access. Also, because of the reduced annual pit operations, this will mean that there is no increased traffic for most of the year. Next slide. The next concern raised was visual impacts and the character of the neighborhood. The view from Bellamy Road residents is not expected to change significantly because the natural vegetative berm will hide pit operations from Bellamy Road view, and this is shown on the next slide. This you should see is a view of street view of at the end of Bellamy Road near Noranda Road, and you can see where I'm pointing towards the vegetated berm and where Noranda Road and Northwood Pulp Mill Road is. You can actually see a thin strip of sand beyond the berm, and that will actually go down in elevation over time. In fact, you'll probably see less sand from this pit operation over time as that gets reduced. Next slide, please. The next concern was around property values. And just to put this in context, I've shown this diagram to show that from the designation area to the nearest residence, we're over 200 meters in distance as the crow flies. Next slide, please. We do have areas in the city that are as close as 60 meters to an operating pit. So we wanted to do some work and look at the property values along these properties. Next slide, please. So we looked at data from the 2020 BC Assessment Authority, and they have showed typically increasing property values consistently within those properties that are 60 meters within an existing operating gravel pit. In fact, we found that a 2020 house sale located within 100 meters of an operating gravel pit was sold at a higher value than its assessed value. So we do not see evidence of reduced house values because of their proximity to the gravel pit. Next slide, please. Finally, the other concerns that were raised previously is around environment. The proposed designation area completely avoids the riparian protection development area. An environmental overview assessment has already been completed by a qualified professional, and if the recommendations of that assessment are followed, the risks are considered low. In addition, When a soil permit application is applied for, an environmental management plan will be required. The applicant has also agreed to register a no-build restrictive covenant on title until a soil removal permit is approved by the city. And finally, an erosion and sediment control plan has already been completed by a qualified professional. Next slide, please. So, Your Worship, we believe that this application for soil removal designation largely addresses the concerns raised by some of the residents. We thank the City Administration for working with us in supporting this application. And Your Worship, thank you for the opportunity to present this presentation and discussion points to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. I have Councillor Frizzell in the queue.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Thank you, Mr. Adamson, for the presentation. Appreciated it. Through to Mr. Wells on the sand and dust suppression piece. The applicant has noted that it's little problem. And does the city do any monitoring on that? Do we have any information about that?
Your Worship, that'll be part of the soil removal permit process, or what we'll do to mitigate. That'll go forward. We'll be looking at that on an ongoing basis, and there's reports that they have to submit every year, and we follow up and do inspections.
The way it was characterized is that the natural berm will mitigate most of that. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. As for the operating hours that have been offered by the applicant, they were offered in this venue right now. Are there ways for us to make an agreement where those hours will be required and observed?
Your Worship, we don't think that's necessary because the next step is a soil removal permit. We'll take care of that from the process. This is just to amend the soil removal bylaw process.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Worship, and through to Mr. Adamson, thank you for your presentation. I was looking to see if you'd had direct communication with the people that utilize the ball field there.
Your Worship, no, not direct contact with the ball diamond users, just the residents.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Nobody else in the queue for you, Mr. Adamson. If you just want to hang on, and we'll go to the phone. Is there anybody from the public, Ms. Conley?
I have no callers on the line, Your Worship. Okay,
so no callers on the line, and obviously, Mr. Adamson, we don't have anybody in the gallery speaking to this issue. Council, any other questions for Mr. Adamson? Seeing none, could I have a motion to close the public hearing, please? Thank you, Councillor Kraus, Councillor Sampson. All those in favor of closure, opposed on the phone and on Zoom to closure of the public hearing? Seeing none, it's carried unanimously to close this public hearing, and we have a recommendation that Council gives third reading to the City of Prince George Soil and Removal Deposit Bylaw number 9030, 2019, Amendment Bylaw number 9102, 2020. Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Sorry, Councillor Everett? Councillor Frizzell moved it. Seconder? Councillor Ramsey. All those in favor in the room? Opposed on the phone or Zoom? Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Adamson, thank you again for your patience this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, if we could go back to D2, I'll go to Mr. Delio, and it's the tax and utility deadlines for 2020, Mr. Delio, and we have 4 recommendations, and we do those separately. Ms. Conley, does that work, or can we do them as...
separately, please.
We'll do them separate, yeah. Thank you very much. Mr. Delio.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think in order to give council and the public a bit more understanding this one, I might talk a bit more than I usually do for my reports. To go back in some history, in the early months of the pandemic, council approved some changes to our taxes and our utilities, both the deadlines and the penalty system when it comes to utilities. So to remind everyone, with taxes, at the time, the province had, actually I'll back up even further, we're legislated in taxes to have a 10% penalty. It's not something that we have control over. What we do have control over is how we collect the 10% and what time frames. So the default deadline for taxes in the province, according to the community charter, is July 2nd. If council and the city does nothing different, your deadline will always be July 2nd or the first business day following July 2nd. And there will be a 10% penalty on any unpaid amounts at that time. The City of Prince George, however, has what's called an alternative municipal tax collection scheme bylaw. And what that does is we set our own deadlines and our own way that we collect that 10% penalty. So what we do here is we changed our date from July 2nd to the first Friday of July. Unless that Friday happens to be July 1st, Canada Day, then it gets shifted to the 8th. And instead of charging 10% all at once, we essentially have a two-deadline system. Your whole amount is due on the first Friday of July, but if it's unpaid, then you have a 5% penalty at that particular time frame. Then we have a second deadline date of the second Friday of September, and any unpaid amounts by that time frame will get the additional 5%, and that's how the City of Prince George collects their 10% on penalties. Last year, the province had changed the deadline for penalties for businesses, classes 4, 5, and 6, which is major industrial, light industrial, and the business tax classes. They had changed the date to October 1st. So in order to kind of align everybody together, Council made the decision to delay all of the second 5% penalty date to October 1st. There is no promise from the province this year that they will maintain that October 1st date. So what we're proposing for you tonight is to move back to that initial second Friday of September for the second 5% penalty date on taxes. Keeping in mind we have no control over that. We have to charge 10% somewhere in the year. So almost a return to business as normal kind of change to this bylaw. There's reasons why we would continue to like to have that second Friday of September. It's mostly, in fact, the prime reason we pick that date is the tax sale for any properties that are in delinquent in arrears for 3 years. They end up going to the tax sale, and the tax sale again is legislated, and that date is always the last Monday of September. So we pick that second 5% penalty to be the second Friday in September, so that we have time to fully attach that penalty, clean the property up, and make sure that the total dollar figure is what it is for tax sale. That would be the first part of this report tonight, is to bring that second deadline back to the second Friday of September for the reasons I've just outlined. Utilities is in a different bylaw, and it's a different animal. We are not legislated to have a 10% penalty. However, we do have a 10% penalty on our utilities. At least we did until the early months of the pandemic in 2020. Council eliminated the 10% penalty and for the second half of 2020. And the way that we did that is in the bylaw, we just removed all language when it came to penalties and interest on our utility payments. So with no other direction, that's how this will carry forward for 2021. And actually, administration is recommending that we do keep this the same for 2021, that there aren't any penalties or interest for utilities for this calendar year. But at the time we removed it, I did promise to Council that administration would return with a proposed interest penalty system as opposed to like a hard penalty system for the utilities. And there's a couple reasons for that too. Fees and charges, like I said, they operate differently. We're supposed to only charge exactly what it costs us to provide the service. So if two people have the same utility bill, and one pays 1 day late and one pays December 30th, they're going to pay the exact same, even though somebody might have paid April 3rd, was late by a day, and someone else waited all the way till, New Year's Eve. We don't charge interest on our current outstanding utility bills. You just get a 10% penalty, and that's it. And that's all you'll get for the whole calendar year. Any unpaid utility amounts as of January 1st roll onto your property taxes. And at that point, they start collecting interest at a rate regulated by the province. That rate is roughly prime plus 3%, and it's updated every quarter. So rather than have this 10% penalty system that really isn't equally applied to somebody who's only a day late as opposed to almost an entire year late, we'd like to go to that same interest payment system that it would have once it rolls over to taxes. We'd like to sort of have a daily interest rate that's attached to unpaid amounts, rather than have this hard 10% fine that, I mean, maybe you're only a few hours late, but if you're late, that's 10%, and that's in the bylaw, and legislatively we have to do it if it's in our bylaw. So that's the proposal on the utility side, is that starting in January of 2022, any unpaid amounts would start getting this daily charge in the same rate prescribed for taxes, for unpaid taxes. And that way, when it rolls over, there's no change to you. It still just carries on as normal. I hope that all makes sense. That's basically the utilities piece that's in front of you tonight. Whenever we bring fees and charges bylaw, if we have the opportunity to make some housekeeping amendments, we make those as well. And so by housekeeping, I mean nothing that's going to materially change the revenue or anything like that. Those kinds of things we typically run through the Finance and Audit Committee. And so we don't bring those kinds of big dollar figure changes at that time, but we do have some housekeeping stuff that we'd like to make. In Mr. Davies' department, the recreation side, we had separate schedules for the CN Center, and then a separate schedule for the rest of our arenas. Mr. Davey has provided a blended schedule now that would address all arenas so that it's all in one spot. That's the one housekeeping amendment. And there's some other detailed pieces that you can see in the report there in that schedule. And the other one is on the off-street parking side. We, in the past, have always collected a deposit for the access card. You know, if you go into a parkade, you have an access card. And if that card is lost or stolen, you don't get your deposit back. But as it turns out, there's always this accounting side where we have to track the deposits, and it's a $20 deposit. And we have some non-refunded deposits that date back years and years and years, and it's actually a very big administrative burden and an auditing burden to carry all this. We'd rather just have a $20 charge, and if your card is lost or stolen or damaged, then you would just have to pay another $20 to get one. But we wouldn't be keeping a logbook of who we owe $20 to, because most people don't even bother stopping by City Hall to get that $20 back. So we end up with this logbook, basically. So that's the other housekeeping change. I think I've talked lots, and maybe I should just answer questions at this point.
Yeah, I think there's some clarification that might need to occur. Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just through to Mr. Dalio, I'm just really just want to highlight the difference between the penalty pay system and the interest pay system. The difference is that we charged like a hard 10%, and this is going to be moving to prime plus 3.
Correct.
So as long as prime plus 3 is less than 10%, it's more favorable to the taxpayer getting a.
Yeah, and that's actually the part that I probably should have hit home much harder. This is a much more beneficial system to the taxpayer. It really will be less of a burden for them, and a fairer burden for people depending on how late they are as well. And so I think it's a much more equitable and fair system to everybody.
Thanks. I think it's, we heard last year that this change was coming. So now that I see it in front of me, it makes a lot of sense. And the fact that it's, a more fair and equitable way to charge a penalty, as you called it, I'll support it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dalio, I don't have anybody else in the queue.
Excellent. I hope that means I explained it well.
Thank you. So we have recommendations, Council, 1 through 4, and we'll do those individually. The first one at D2 is first 3 readings of the City of Prince George Alternative Municipal Tax Collection Scheme Bylaw number 7280, 2001. The amendment to bylaw number is 9175, 2021. Thank you, Councillor Frizzell, Councillor Everett. All those in favor in the room. Opposed on the phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, it's carried unanimously. Recommendation 2. Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. All those in favor in the room on final reading. Those opposed on phone or Zoom. Seeing or hearing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. And first 3 readings on recommendation 3.
Move 3, please.
Thank you, Councillor McConaughey, Councillor Ramsey. All those in favor in the room. Those opposed on the phone or Zoom. Hearing no opposition, that carries unanimously. And we have recommendation 4. Councillor Kraus. Councillor Ramsey. All those in favor of recommendation 4 in the room. Opposed on Zoom or the phone. Hearing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Delio. Mr. Wells, D3, release of air emissions inventory and modeling report. Over to you.
I believe we have a presentation from the UMBC air emissions inventory update, PowerPoint. Be online, Your Worship.
Thank you. And who's presenting this evening, Mr. Wells?
Your Worship, on Zoom we have Dr. Peter Jackson, Dr. Ainsley, Braden Nielsen, and Gail Roth.
Good evening. Welcome. Thank you very much for your patience this evening. We've had a long evening already. Thanks for hanging in there, and I'll turn it over to you.
Dr. Jackson, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to thank Worship and Council for allowing me the opportunity to present. I'll start my video here. The results of an air quality emissions modeling update that we undertook in the last few years. First, I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors. So on the line, we have Gail Roth and also Braden Nielsen, especially Braden, who actually did the work that's today. And Gail, some of you may know, is the air quality meteorologist with BC Environment. She, as well as Bruce Ainsley and I, supervised Braden in his undertaking of this project. Slide. We could advance one more slide, please. There we go. Okay, so what I'll be doing today is just in the report. I'll give a little bit of purpose and background what we were doing of the updated micro emission inventory for PM 2.5. I'll show some modeling part of the work, and we'll do some comparisons with observations as well as the modeling. And we'll focus in on some of the main results, which are looking at the PM 2.5 averages by neighborhood. I'll summarize main findings and main limitations. I seem to have lost connection.
Yes, it appears we've lost connection. Dr. Jackson, are you able to hear me?
Okay, I can hear you fine, yes. Can council and his work see the screen? Let's get on my Zoom link here.
So I'm currently on the outline screen.
Your Worship, it appears that Dr. Jackson has disconnected, so I think he's looking to reconnect.
Okay.
You have to turn his camera off. Use it first.
Okay, so I can now hopefully. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little touch and go, but we can give it a try.
Maybe a little touch. I'm not sure what the challenge was worked just fine for the past few hours. Okay, I seem to be going in and out of connection. Can you hear me now? There we go.
Yes, that's
all
better.
right. Okay, good. Okay, I'm not sure what the problem was there. So, so this report is really about PM 2.5. PM 2.5 refers to particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in diameter, and it's a particularly significant air pollutant. Worldwide, it's the major environmental cause of mortality, and in fact, about 2/3 of the environment-related global deaths are from indoor and outdoor air pollution. And outdoor air pollution, especially PM 2.5, causes about 4.2 million deaths annually. Canada in general has excellent air quality, but some areas do have challenges. Prince George, like other BC interior towns, can at times have elevated levels of PM 2.5, and this is due to a combination of sources which exist in our airshed, as well as our local geography, topography, and the meteorology of our area. So consequently, PG Air, the Prince George Air Improvement Roundtable, has focused on reducing PM 2.5 for several years now. And this report is really about an exercise to better understand the sources of PM 2.5 that are contributing to the air quality where people breathe. Next slide, please. So the work has occurred in a few phases. So an earlier phase of the work was based on 2005 emission inventory. So an emission inventory refers to what is being put into the air by the various activities that create, especially PM 2.5. It's long been felt that due to changes in emissions in the airshed since 2005, it would be a worthwhile endeavor to update the emission inventory to reflect current levels. A lot of the emission reductions have occurred by industry in that period between now and 2005, and so there have been significant reductions. But it's not just about the emissions. The emissions are what goes into the air, but what we really care about from a health perspective is what we actually wind up breathing, and that's related to concentration. Generally, you might think high emission equals high concentration, and that would be true, except it depends on where the emissions are occurring and how well diluted they become. So a large source located far away from where people live could be less important than a small source located in your neighborhood, for example. So in this project, we wanted to look at the emissions and then model those emissions to calculate what would be the ambient concentrations where people breathe the air. And this is the information that you really need to know to effectively manage air quality to protect public health. And especially, you'd like to be able to draw the link between what sources are contributing to the air that you breathe, to the air pollution that you breathe. So ideally, if you're breathing the air outside at your home, you'd like to know which sources are contributing and how much they're contributing to the air pollution that you're inhaling. And that information is very useful for air quality management. That's exactly what's needed by air quality management. Go to the next slide, please. This is focusing on the emission inventory itself, so what is going into the air. And I'm just going to focus on the box that's circled in red, which is for PM 2.5. There are other pollutants we model as well, so PM10, which is a coarser type of particulate matter, SO2 and NOx, which contribute to formation of PM. But I'm going to focus just on the PM 2.5 for now. And in the blue is the previous emission inventory, which is based on 2005 emissions, and in the yellow is the updated emissions. So you can see, if you look at the industry line down here, these are the permitted industries. In the middle, the large line, there's been a significant reduction which occurred between 2005 and now. And this is mainly due to upgrades undertaken at the major industrial emitters within the airshed. Another large change, apparent change, is actually, if you look at the road dust line, the very top line in the bar graph, that seems to have been reduced, but in fact, that's just a change in the methodology, the way in which we accounted for road dust going into the air. So that's not an actual reduction, it's more of a methodological thing as we improve the modeling system. So if we look at the pollution going into the air, we find that industry is the single largest contributor, followed by residential heating, and this is mainly wood stove use, because natural gas contributes very little in terms of particulate matter, followed by commercial dust and then other sources. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is just showing the overall result of PM 2.5 in the airshed model for 3 years. So in the model, we take particulate matter at all the sources and from all activities, so industrial emitters, but also road dust, lawnmower use, commercial heating, wood stove use, even barbecuing and lawn mowing and all those sorts of commercial and other commercial activities, et cetera, as well, are all put into the model. The model takes the emissions and then it has a meteorology part, which transports and dilutes the air pollution, and then it calculates the average concentration. So this graph here on the right, circled in red, indicates the 3-year average hourly concentration of PM2.5 in the airshed. So the model has a time step of every hour. So we've modeled every hour for a 3-year period. We'll go to the next slide, please. This is just a comparison between observations and models, because this is a model, and so it's not the same as data you would collect from a monitor. And so we're very interested to understand how well the model can replicate what was actually observed by an actual monitoring location. So in the blue, at 2 locations, so again focusing on the red box for PM2.5, the one on the left is labeled GLAD, is for Gladstone Elementary in College Heights. And the one labeled PLAZ is the Plaza 400 site in downtown Prince George at the corner of 4th Avenue and Queensway. The blue box shows the distribution of observed values from the monitor at those locations. And so the line in the middle is the median, the red X is the average, the box indicates the 25th and 50th percentile. These are called box plots. And so it shows the distribution of observations in blue, and then pink is the model. And so you can see the pink, the averages are quite close for the average condition, but there's less variance in the model. For example, at the Plaza site, the range of numbers is more similar, but the model is slightly under predicting the observations. I'll go to the next slide, please. And now we're just again focusing on the red box, looking at the variation by hour of the day at both Gladstone and Plaza. So here we're trying to get a sense of whether the model is replicating what's happening in the daily pattern of air pollution. So hour of the day is on the left for Gladstone and Plaza, and then on the right is month of year, so looking at the annual variation. So you can see that in general, again, blue is observed and the pink or red is modeled. So you're seeing differences, obviously, but generally the pattern is not too badly replicated between model and observation. We can go to the next slide. Well, this is where it gets interesting. Now we can break down, because we have a model that predicts the concentration essentially every 500 meters. So every 500 meter grid point, there's a calculation of the concentration of particulate matter in the model. And not just that, but which sources actually contributed to it. So this graph on the right here for PM2.5 is breaking down the average concentration by neighborhood. And so you can see the neighborhoods here: Cranbrook Hill, North Nechako, Central Nechako, Northwood, Chief Lake, etc. Downtown 1 and Downtown 2 are in the middle here, and then going to the south, the BCR, Airport, etc. So, and then we have the concentration, the mean annual concentration on the x-axis. There's a few guidelines on here that are the air quality objectives. And so this one labeled CACS 2015 is the Canadian Ambient Air Quality Standard for PM2.5 for an annual average in 2015 of 10. In 2020, it was revised to be 8.8. And then the BC Provincial Air Quality Objective for PM2.5 is 8 micrograms per cubic meter. This is on an annual average basis. And so you can see that the model predicts most neighborhoods are below the most stringent level, the air quality objective. A few neighborhoods are above it. And you can see which sources contribute to it. And so I'll just talk about the sources briefly. The blue is background, and you'll notice it doesn't change. So the background is what's coming into the airshed that's not produced within Prince George. So it's the pollution, the PM2.5 that would be here if there were no city. We can't do much to control that. Some of that is from natural sources. Some of it's from other airsheds, although most of it would be natural sources. So it's around 2 or 3 micrograms per cubic meter. It varies by season and doesn't change across the neighborhoods. The other colors correspond to different emission categories. So the green is industry. These are the permitted emitters, pulp mill, sawmills, oil refinery, etc. The light yellow is heating. And this is both natural gas and wood stove, but natural gas is a tiny proportion. So you can think of this as wood stove use within homes and residences. And then we get into a few others. On-road mobile, these are tailpipe emissions. Rail is in red. Road dust is in the light brown. Commercial dust is in the darker brown. And then miscellaneous, so everything else is in the darkest brown. So you can see how they add up on an annual basis. And so you'll notice a few things. So in some neighborhoods, for example, Hart North, the dominant non-background source is actually wood burning in the light yellow here. Next, different kinds of dust, and then industry. And so it varies by neighborhood depending on the number of wood stoves that we know or we think are in the neighborhood, and how much wood is being burned for the yellow part, and then essentially proximity to industrial emitters for the green part. Go to the next slide where we break it down by season. So this is the same graph as the previous one, but now it's by season. So we have winter in the upper left, spring in the upper right, summer in the lower left, and fall in the lower right. And so the big difference, of course, is the yellow. So the yellow is heating, residential heating, but again, mainly wood stove use. And of course, it's only important in the winter, or largely winter, spring, and fall, and not really at all in the summer, because people don't burn wood in their stoves in the summer when it's hot outside. So you can see the interseasonal variability. The green, the industrial emissions are pretty constant throughout the year, but the big change in the annual levels is the contribution from wood stove use. Next slide, please. So the model itself, when it's run, has these hourly concentrations from all these sources. It's about 300 gigabytes of data, and we've developed, and it's not quite ready yet, but it's nearly ready, a web-based tool to be able to look at the concentrations. We call that AirQuest. We had that with the earlier version of the work as well, and it's nearly ready to be looked at with the latest model results. We'll go to the next slide, where I'll emphasize the main findings. So we find that the dispersion model, which takes the emissions and puts it into the atmosphere, it compares well with the measurements of PM 2.5. The model tends to underpredict PM and its variability at the measurement sites. The modeled PM is primarily from background, so what would be there without Prince George here, followed by industry heating, which is mainly residential wood burning, followed by road dust and commercial dust. These are the main dominant sources in most neighborhoods. Most neighborhoods are below the standards, so that's a good thing. You're achieving the criteria. But a few sites, especially near the BCR in the south and in the bowl, where there's both a combination of industry and wood burning, and some places in the heart, are exceeding the annual air quality objective for PM 2.5. We find it's different across the seasons. So in the winter, it's heating from wood stove use is a dominant source. Road dust is dominant in the spring and summer, and commercial dust in the summer and fall. Whereas industry tends to be a fairly constant contribution to the levels throughout the year. And we'll go to the next slide. There are some limitations. So in updating the emission inventory, we had limited time and limited budget. We updated many of the sources, but not all of them. So we were not able to update the rail emissions, and we know that this is actually a limitation because rail has changed a fair amount since 2005 due to the development of the inland port. However, even if it doubled or tripled, it still would be a fairly small fraction of the contribution to ambient levels. We also did not get information to allow us to update the rail emission inventory. We find when we look carefully at the model results and, for example, compare the concentrations in the model with respect to wind direction, that we think that we've probably underestimated the industrial emissions. We're not quite sure exactly why. The industrial emissions are the only ones that are actually measured, so we have the best handle on the industrial emissions compared with all the others. But the wind sector analysis suggests that we're a little bit low on the estimation of the emissions from the industrial sector. We think that we're probably overestimating the wood stove use. And again, we diagnose that by comparing the modeled concentrations versus wind direction when the winds are, for example, at Plaza are bringing wood stove emissions onto the Plaza monitor. We find that the model concentrations are higher than observed. So from that, we diagnose that we're probably a little bit too high in our estimation of the emissions from wood stoves. And next slide, which I think is the last slide. Just want to acknowledge the people who contribute to this project. It's been kind of a long-going project. Again, started in 2005, 2006, and then the first phase concluding in 2010, and then some work being done in between then and now, and then being wrapped up most recently by Braden Nilsson. And other people involved in the project were Christophe Corbel from France, Dennis Fudge, who's an air pollution meteorologist who preceded Gail Roth in Prince George, Andreas Vieira, John Spagnol. They had many contributions to the work, and also like to acknowledge funding for the project, for this phase of the project, which is from the City of Prince George, PG Air, and Northern Health. At that, I'll pause and be happy to take any questions His Worship or Council may have.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. And I do have Councillor Frizzell in the queue. Councillor Frizzell.
Mayor Hall. Thank you, Mayor Hall, and thank you to Dr. Jackson and your team. Since the last time we talked to you, I just wanted to acknowledge that what a great moment to be recognized by the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society as one of their fellows, one of the top 50 in Canada, and to have that expertise not just here in Prince George, but delivering this data and the interpretation of the data back to Council. We're very fortunate indeed. I wanted to thank you for your role and your team's work in getting this information to us. In particular, your observation when you were reviewing the neighborhood that most neighborhoods are below the most stringent recommendations of the province. My first election was in 2008, and air quality was top of the list for the #1 item in that council election that year. And we've come a long ways. You've observed that it's from a lot of work that's been done by our industrial emitters. Do you see, or does PG Air see where some low-hanging fruit might be to get the PM 2.5 down further?
Would you like me to comment?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, so as you know, PG Air has long been looking at air quality management in this airshed on a collaborative basis with all the stakeholders at the table, and they've had an ongoing wood stove exchange program for a number of years. So wood stoves are one area which is certainly worth. I mean, the modeling suggests this as well, that is worth continued effort on swapping out old wood stoves, putting in new CSA, EPA-approved wood stoves which emit much less, thinking very carefully about the approval of wood stove use. In terms of its impact on PM 2.5. I think another result of this project is perhaps that the perception of the relative importance of different categories of emitters is probably different from what most people would expect. So, for example, in industry comes out quite a bit lower than if you asked a typical citizen what they would think in terms of air quality of PM 2.5 at least. And industry has been actually spending a lot of money and going to a lot of effort to improve their emissions over many years now, but especially since 2005.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And if we were to focus in on some messages that could go out to the broader community about Prince George, one of those about how, again, most neighborhoods are below the most stringent recommendations. Would that be the key message to pull out from these most recent findings?
I think so, and I guess I caution here as well that this is a model study, and so a model models are, you know, as a modeler I can say that models are always wrong. It's just a question of how wrong they are, but that doesn't mean they aren't useful. And so there's things to learn from models, but recognizing that model levels aren't the same as observed levels. I can say that we have kind of another study underway in which we've deployed about 60 PM 2.5 monitors across Prince George in collaboration with Environment and Climate Change Canada. So, and Braden, in his master's thesis, which he's working on right now as part of his project, will be comparing the model results with the very dense network of observations. So instead of at 2 monitors, we have about 60 monitors across the airshed. So pretty soon we're going to be able to say with a lot more confidence, you know, whether the model is performing, you know, as well as we hope it is, and if that's borne out by observations. Then we'll have an observation-based survey to be able to talk about levels at the neighborhood scale within Prince George.
We're eager to hear the update when that comes through as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. Councillor Sampson, followed by Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll keep my comments short. And Dr. Jackson, thank you very much for taking a great deal of information and presenting it in a way that I can thoroughly understand. I really do appreciate that, because there's a lot of information here, and frankly, I didn't prior to being on council understand it quite to the same degree as I do now. So thank you very much for that. And I just want to say I appreciate the importance of updating this. I noted that it was last done over a decade ago, so I just really appreciate getting this updated info. Now, I want to draw some attention to the strategic plan ends this year. And so just some further maybe information on how we're going to see that play out as you guys continue to develop your new strategic plan and where that's headed, and how you see the City of Prince George's role continuing with PGR.
So I should clarify that I'm not on PGR at this moment. I have been involved with PGR in the past, and perhaps Gail would care to comment as she's a member of PGR.
Yeah, for sure. So the work that this project brought forward is one of the key pieces of information that will be incorporated into the strategic planning, and that will guide PGR using, credible scientific information to develop their annual work plans and strategic plan going forward. Maybe repeat the second part of your question there. I can't recall.
Just wondering, with the strategic plan being developed right now, what is the timeline for that, and what is the connection going to be looking like with the City of Prince George? And is it similar, status quo, or do you see that changing?
Well, the PGR is currently actively going through the strategic planning process just to identify priorities. That's current engagement as we speak. In terms of how the city would be engaged with PGR, I would anticipate they would be looking for a continued strong partnership. Air quality management really requires multiple stakeholders to be at the table because there's multiple sources, and having those connections and finding the solutions really takes that collaboration to be successful.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks again for the presentation. Last question, perhaps through to staff. Our contributions are funded through the environmental department. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just really first want to commend Dr. Jackson and his team for the work done on this research project. I think it's an incredibly huge benefit to have UNBC, a research institution in our, research university in our community to partner with to do this work. So I have to do a little bit of a shout out to my alma mater. So thank you to you and your team. I just am curious about the future air management strategies that will be developed from this report. Will those be coming back to council at some point?
I'm not sure if I can answer that exactly. Maybe Gail wants to jump in, or maybe his worship would. But I guess if there are actions that would impact city operations or city bylaws, for example, they would come to council, obviously.
And I think, Doctor, that's just a conversation that we can have certainly now with our acting city manager and where this moves from here. But I would absolutely ask you to come back to council and give us updates as your work progresses.
Thanks, Mayor Hall.
Silence. That work,
I wasn't sure
Ramsey?
if that was coming back to me or not. Yeah, that answers my question. I would look forward to seeing how this progresses and how the research directs the work. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to thank you folks very much for your presentation this evening. And with my previous comment as a result of Councillor Ramsey's question, certainly invite you back when you see the time is right. We'd be very pleased to get updates. And I again thank you very much for your patience this evening. We had a long evening prior to your presentation and budget to get through. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, we have a recommendation to receive the report for information. Thank you, Councillor Scott, Councillor Frizzell. All those in favor in the room, opposed on the phone and on Zoom. Seeing no opposition, that carries unanimously. Mr. Wells, Car 60 expansion update, and I think this was on the, it's been talked about a lot, and was the information coming back to us this evening is as a result of Councillor Sampson's notice of motion that he provided here a few months ago.
That's correct, Your Worship. This was based on Councillor Sampson's notice of motion. Ms. Bone is in the audience to answer any questions regarding the report, Your Worship, if Council desires.
Before Ms. Bone, thank you very much for being here, and I think as questions arise, we'll call you down. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and I'm really excited to see this report come back to Council. It was, I believe, June 27th I wrote that notice of motion and brought it forward, and I'm just really excited that we're seeing some information come back. My goal with that motion was to gain additional resources for mental health, substance abuse, addiction issues, and other social issues throughout our community with the benefit to our entire community. I'm really excited that reading in this report and through conversation I've had with Ms. Bone and staff that this motion was a bit of one of the catalysts for developing components of that downtown community safety hub that's coming soon. And it will be and is one of the reasons why we're seeing some of the resources that we are through conversation with Northern Health with the additional specialized nursing positions and other resources. But my motion was also focused on the mental health of all of our residents, because these issues affect everybody, not just our downtown folk, not just our marginalized community, but a much wider segment of our population as well. It's spread throughout the entire community, which is why I did specify and really hone in on that Car 60 piece, because it goes so much farther. It reaches so many more people. When I was doing some research on bringing that motion forward, I talked to a number of folks in our community who had used that service, and then thereafter, once Council unanimously passed it, I talked to a number of folks, and they variety of stories, variety of reasons, but who have been benefited from that Car 60 program, and I think this is just a starting point. This report doesn't really give us quite, I don't think, definitive answers on what's going to move on next. So but it does give us a good starting point and lots of great information. So I think, Your Worship, I would like to see Northern Health and the RCMP come back maybe together as a group here and present to Council and really give us an idea of what their plans are for that Car 60 model, as well as those additional resources that they're both willing to allocate to our community safety hub downtown, because I think they're going to work hand in hand. But I think a motion would probably be appropriate, Your Worship, to ask staff to send that request to Northern Health and the RCMP to come and make that presentation to Council. So I'll move that staff asks the RCMP and Northern Health to come to Council and share their plans on the Car 60 model, as well as the additional resources that they're planning on allocating towards these mental health, addiction, and other social issues in our community. So thanks, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Can I speak, Your Worship?
Yep.
Thanks, Your Worship. I read through the report. I saw in there, it said Northern Health and the RCMP are able to provide additional details if it is the wish of Council. It is my wish to get more information. I appreciate Councillor Sampson's motion, and I just want to make sure that the current Car 60 program isn't going to be reduced at all by adding in this additional service. So if that can be maybe touched on when staff do come back, I think that would really help me to understand more about this. But I look forward to seeing how this can perhaps enhance this program in our community with our partners who are Northern Health and the RCMP.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship. I appreciate the work on this, and I'm just wondering if the referral motion, if administration could look at what other communities are doing so we're not reinventing the wheel, because I think it's been going on since 2005. There's a number of communities that do the same thing that have different numbers for the cars, but I think there's a lot of information out there that other communities are doing and best practices that we might want to incorporate into ours as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Crouse.
Well, I certainly will be supporting the motion, and I think it's great that I really think it's great that this team is going to be a part of the community hub. I think that's a great addition to downtown services, having been a downtown service provider. And but I think it's also important that we hear what the plans are for the provision of service throughout the community. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor Crouse. Okay, we have a recommendation on the floor. And it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor in the room, all those opposed on phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Ms. Bone, thank you very much. Appreciate your patience and hanging around until we dealt with this issue. Okay, D5, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration requests
Council's authorization to apply for grant funding for the Invest in Canada Infrastructure Program COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream for the Ferguson Lake Nature Reserve Rehabilitation Project. Ferguson Lake Nature Park is a 55-hectare property situated in the heart, operated through a long-term lease from the province. It's a popular destination. The existing boardwalk needs to be reconstructed. Various parts of the trail system require resurfacing. There's other infrastructure upgrades required, including wheelchair accessible picnic tables, a trail route from the main picnic area to the fishing dock, and a viewpoint for wheeled users and caregivers. Your Worship, the application deadline was January 27, 2021, and requires a resolution of Council. Shortly after the grant application is submitted, Administration submitted an application subject to Council's approval. The proposed project achieves the grants program's outcome for the support of development of active transportation networks. Eligible programs must begin prior to the fall of 2021 and be complete by December 2021. The total estimated cost for the Ferguson Lake Nature Reserve project grant submission is approximately $850,000. If unsuccessful, Your Worship, only minor repairs would occur this year. Administration is requesting Council's authorization to apply for the grant, and Administration would like to thank Lori Kosak for her hard work on this application. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank staff for their work on this grant application. I think it's a really timely grant application. I spent some time out there this summer, and it's such a great park. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done and to maintain that quality that we expect from our parks. I guess my question, it's not necessarily part of the grant application, but I'm just wondering if consideration has been given to the parking lot up there, because it's not really conducive to the number of visitors that go there. I know that I went up there in the summer, and of course this is not the norm, but there's probably 20 to 40 vehicles parking on the road, and it just seems not feasible for the long term.
Your Worship, it's something we'll look at. I'm not sure if there's stipulations on how much parking area we can utilize under the lease, but we'll look at that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Frizzell, followed by Sampson.
Well, thank you, Mayor Hall, and bravo to Ms. Kosak on this application. Be absolutely behind putting our weight behind this one and getting the council resolution in place. Just wanted to highlight that under this COVID resilience stream, that's 80% funding by the federal government and 20% funding by the provincial. So this is zero cost to us should we get it approved. That's fantastic. Again, bravo. This is good work.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll keep my comments short. Ditto, but I hear Councillor McConaughey always reference Councillor Scott. It's only one taxpayer, but any time that we can get other levels of government to help us here in Prince George, it is a great thing. And so thank you very much to Ms. Kosak for her work on this and for identifying this potential grant stream for us. I hate to admit, but this summer was the first time I've ever been up to this site, and I loved it and was quite the frequent visitor for the rest of the summer, and would encourage other residents to take advantage of some of the great parks that we have in town. So I'll be supporting this as well. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Council, we have two recommendations. We can do those together. Somebody wants to move them. Thank you. Seconder is Councillor Kraus. All those in favor in the room? Opposed on the phone or Zoom? Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. D6 is a rezoning amendment application number RZ100682, bylaw number 9163-2020. Mr. Wells, any comment on that, or can we move to the recommendations?
Your Worship, no comments. We just support the application. First two readings.
Thank you very much. So if I could have a mover of recommendation 1 for first and second reading.
First and second, please,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Hall.
Councillor McConaughey, Councillor Ramsey, all those in favor in the room, opposed on the phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. And recommendation 2 is to waive the requirement for a public hearing. Thank you, Councillor Everett, Councillor Kraus, all those in favor in the room, opposed on the phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Sorry, Councillor Frizzell, did I miss you?
Oh, just a question on passing the waiving of the right to the public hearing. Will this come back, and when would this be coming back to us?
Ms. Connolly.
So, Your Worship, with the public hearing being waived, it would come back to Council for third reading following sign-off by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure on this application. So we would advertise for public consultation by a written submission, and Council would receive that correspondence at the time that the bylaw returns for third reading.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Connolly. D7 is a rezoning amendment application number RZ100685, bylaw number 9164. Mr. Wells, any comment?
Yes, Your Worship. On this one, the applicant has applied to rezone 6499 and 6437 Hart Highway from C2 Regional Commercial to C26 Regional Commercial to allow the operation of a retail cannabis store. Administration supports the application.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. We have a recommendation for first and second. Councillor Frizzell, are you in the queue, or did I miss you on the last one?
That's from the last one.
Okay, I got you. So I've got Councillor Everett and Councillor Sampson. All those in favor in the room, opposed on Zoom or phone. Seeing no opposition, that carries unanimously. D8, rezoning application number RZ100693, bylaw number 9182, 2021. It's a text amendment. Mr. Wells, any comment?
Yes, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to add the Z21 Integrated Health and Housing Zone to the City of Prince George zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We have a recommendation that we need to take care of, and its first and second reading is 1, and waive the requirement for a public hearing. Thank you, Councillor Everett. Councillor Kraus. Sorry, Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just had a question through to Mr. Wells, just around the supportive housing definition. Is that inclusive of the types of housing that might be put on that property in phase 2 and 3, or would we have to see this come back again to amend if this is the zoning that will be used for that?
Your Worship, this wouldn't affect the proposal for that project. It won't have to come back.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Ramsey. And we have nobody in the queue. We have recommendation for first and second reading. Councillor Scott, Councillor Ramsey, all those in favor in the room, opposed on Zoom and phone. Seeing no opposition, that carries unanimously. And the other one is to waive the requirement for a public hearing. Councillor Frizzell, Councillor Ramsey, all those in favor in the room, opposed on the phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Wells, D9 is 390 Nicholson Street Road Closure Bylaw number 9151, 2020.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval to close a road area adjacent to 390 Nicholson Road with the intent to sell to the adjoining property owner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation for first and second reading. Councillor Scott moves that. Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. All those in favor in the room, opposed on the phone or Zoom. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. And D10, Mr. Wells, the rezoning amendment application number RZ100664, bylaw number 9134 for third reading.
Thank you, Your Worship. The applicant has applied to rezone 1919 17th Avenue to allow a supportive housing development. The proposed site-specific text amendment will add housing supportive as a principal use on the property. Administration supports the application.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just had a question about the attachment letter from the Aboriginal Housing Society. In a lot of the correspondence, it says that this is a 3-story apartment building, but in the diagram, it actually shows that it's 4 stories under phase 3. Oh, the one before, 2 before, I think. Yeah, so in this diagram, it says phase 3, and then it says 4-story.
apartment building?
Your worship, the phasing and developments are a work in progress on this site, so we're just dealing typically with the zone at hand.
Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Sampson, followed by Frizzell.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just short comments. I just wanted to say we've seen a lot of this proposal over from its inception all the way through to where it's at today, and we've been receiving a lot of positive correspondence on it, and really appreciative of the folks who have reached out to share their support for this. Obviously, any opposition, of course, is welcome, but I doubt we're going to see it for this project. It's really a positive note for our community, so I'll be supporting this. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Through to Mr. Wells, one of the letters that was submitted had conditional support for the proposal based on 4 items, and this is the Martinsich letter. I'm just curious about our capacity for enforcing these, or what your response is on the conditional support that was given in the letter. Seem that many of these are things we don't have capacity.
That's correct, Your Worship. We can enforce some of those points there.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Move third reading.
Thank you. Seconder is Councillor Sampson. All those in favor of third reading in the room, opposed on the phone or Zoom? Hearing and seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. D11 is a rezoning amendment application number RZ100680, bylaw number 9159. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. The applicant would like to rezone 2139 Redwood Street from RT1 2-unit residential to RM3 multiple residential to allow the construction of a 6-unit dwelling building. Administration supports the application.
Thank you very much. I don't have anybody in the queue. Council, this is for third reading. Councillor Everett, Councillor Kraus, all those in favor in the room, opposed on Zoom or the phone? Seeing and hearing no opposition, that carries unanimously. D12, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. McIntosh, Acting Director of Civic Operations. Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Constructed in the early 70s, the Prince George Playhouse has been the primary venue for the local arts community for approximately 50 years. In 1996, a major renovation was undertaken to expand seating capacity and construct a fly tower. The entire building exterior was also renovated and finished with an acrylic stucco cladding system widely used in this era. In early December of 2020, a portion of the stucco cladding fell off the Playhouse exterior. Initial visual inspection of the exposed envelope indicated extensive rot was present due to the infiltration of moisture. A building envelope specialist was hired to conduct a condition assessment for the entire building envelope. The field assessment was completed on February 5th, 2021. Administration is now waiting to receive a formal report in the upcoming weeks. The report will reflect the results of the condition assessment, repair strategies, and associated costs for repairs and renewal. Thank you, Your Worship. Myself and Mr. Hanson are available for any questions you may have.
Good. Welcome, Mr. Hanson. Good to have you here. You've been here a lot over the last couple of weeks. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wanted to add some comments and ask a question here. But first, it's really unfortunate that we're seeing, this type of damage in a relatively not that old building. But I'm glad we're on top of it. I just wanted to point out, I think public perception might be that this building might not be used that frequently, but this is one of our only public spaces focused on the arts, and I think it's really important that we continue to invest in the arts. And although the future of this building and all of our buildings is always part of a big debate about how do we reinvest and plan for their their succession plans. I think we do need to have that conversation with this building and how we continue to support the arts community. But I just want to point that out that we do a lot to support the sporting community and the recreation community, but we can always do better by the arts, and that this might be a catalyst to draw some attention there as well, and what we do to plan for the future of our support for that. So that's just my general comment, but maybe through to Mr. McIntosh. At this point, is there any sort of estimation that we're looking at, or any further context on cost with this?
Your Worship, the building envelope specialist, we would rather rely on his expertise before we provide any estimated costs of repair or renewal.
Great, thanks very much. And if no matter how much it costs, where will we be pulling from to fund these repairs? Perhaps through to Mr. Dalio.
Mr. Dalio.
That would still have yet to be determined. We could take a look at our reserve balances and come back with suggested options for that.
Okay. Thanks, Your Worship. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I get in, Your Worship?
Yep. Councillor Kraus, followed by Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship, and I agree with Councillor Sampson. It really is our best small venue. And I think that I really hope it's repairable and that the cost is manageable, because I think we need to preserve these kinds of facilities in our community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have to agree with my council colleagues that this is an important facility in our community. I've spent numerous hours with various different art groups in our community going to support their events and community celebrations in this building. So it's a little bit heart-wrenching to see our infrastructure literally falling apart. I'm sure there's the sky is falling joke in there somewhere. I guess my question, we've had some envelope issues with other facilities. Obviously, this is quite an advanced stage. Is there any emergency funding or emergency grants that we can apply for, or just would that process just take too long? This is an issue now that needs to be fixed. Perhaps through to Mr. Babbage.
So, Your Worship, first step is to get the scope of the damage and the cost estimate. We are always looking at grant funding that's available and making applications accordingly. But as it stands right now, I don't believe there's any grants that we believe would fit the problem at hand. We'll report back to Council once we have the issue identified and a potential cost, and then review again to see if there's any grants that are available at that time, Your Worship.
Thank you so much.
Good, thank you very much. Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship. I disagree with a little bit about us being on top of it, because I was at the building the morning after the big windstorm that knocked that section off, and I think it was just by fluke, if you will, we saw the extensive damage. So my question to administration, when you look at the mold and the rot from the picture, I would assume that there has to be some sort of rot or something showing from the inside. Am I correct or wrong on that?
That wouldn't be correct. That rot and that mold would be to the outside of the building only. At least it is in this particular case.
My concern is that, this is obviously bad for a while. So if there was no rot on the inside and the vapor barrier, held the rot to the outside, I think that's good. My concern is if, there was an opportunity for us to find this earlier, it would have been nice. But, perhaps by the looks of it and what you're saying, there was no way that we could have, found this. But judging by that picture there, I used to do construction a long time ago, and it's safe to say that I would think that there's probably a big chunk of that wall that could be rotten. I hope not, but we'll see what the report comes back with, and we'll go from there. But I'm hoping it's not going to be a significant cost, but it will have to be repaired. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Scott and then back to Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess I'm just curious, in the normal course of events, how would something like this have come to light if there hadn't been a windstorm?
Your Worship, I believe it would be probably a smaller scale failure, I would assume. Water leaking into the interior of the building, that kind of thing, that would cause further investigation on our part. I think that to discover rot of this extent, it was probably in our best interest to have such a substantial failure at this time.
And I know that that particular storm took a portion of the gateway roof down to its plywood, and a piece of the Victoria Medical Building roof ended up in the middle of Victoria Street. It was quite the night. So thankfully we found this.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks for letting me back in, Your Worship. Just clarifying, this piece of the wall came down in early December, not the recent windstorm we had. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. And then lastly, just a thought that I have had while having this conversation was the Civic Center was actually built around the same time and has similar outside facade on some portions of it. And just, I guess, a comment of thought that I think it was built the same year and has a similar outside facade. So I'm not sure if we were able to conduct some sort of preventative checking into that kind of thing before pieces of the wall fall off. If they are going to fall off, then just I guess it just came to mind. That was all.
I'll point out CN Center is the same kind of stucco system.
Great. Okay, so we're on it. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hanson. And Mr. McIntosh, thanks for your work on this and look forward to the report coming out. Council, if I could have a motion to receive the information. Thank you, Councillor Kraus, Councillor Everett. All those in favour in the room, opposed on the phone or on Zoom. Hearing and seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Council, at Section E, we have bylaws for final reading on E1. Thank you. Councillor Scott. Councillor Frizzell, all those in favour of final in the room, opposed on the phone or on Zoom. Seeing no opposition, it's carried unanimously. Council, we have correspondence to deal with at Section F. I'm going to pull F9 and 10 to talk to, which is NAV Canada. Councillor Sampson, are you in this one?
F7.
Which one?
Yep.
No, just hang on, Councillor Skaken.
F2 and where's the other one? F7. Did you already say that one, Your Worship?
I did.
Okay, great. F2 and F5.
Okay, if I can just deal with one at a time. So, Councillor Sampson, you want F2 and F5?
Yep.
Councillor Skaken.
F7, please.
Councillor Frizzell.
F1,
I guess we're just going to pull all of them. Councillor Kraus.
F3.
Okay, let me guess. F4, Councillor Ramsey. Which one? Okay, let's start off with, nobody wants F6?
Sorry, Your Worship, I wanted F1 as well, I meant to say.
Oh, too late, it's already gone. Who wants F8? Nobody. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to F1, and that's Councillor Frizzell. Did you mention, doesn't matter. F1, Councillor Frizzell, you're on the floor.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Hall. I'm just going to move the motion that's recommended here. And the goal of this is to promote the 2021 census. We all know that when we get accurate numbers, the funding that comes to Prince George is more accurate and more improved. The current numbers place us at about 75,000 officially, but given the growth in this city over the last years and the development and the investment, it's likely to top that. I think this is going to be hugely valuable, so I move that City of Prince George supports the 2021 census and encourages all residents to complete their census questionnaire online at www.censusgc.ca. Accurate and complete census data support programs and services that benefit our community.
Thank you. All those in favor in the room? Opposed on the phone and Zoom? And before I call that this has been supported unanimously, I'm wondering, Mr. Van Adricum, if we can get this out on the website and our social media platforms, and not just our letter tomorrow, or our highlight letter. This is great news. Councillor Frizzell is bang on when he talks about transfer payments to our municipality is dependent on this census. So thank you very much. And that's carried unanimously. Councillor Sampson on that issue? Sorry, I should have got to you before I called.
No, that's okay. Thanks so much, Your Worship. I just wanted to say I completely agree with Councillor Frizzell and ask the question, is there a possibility that we could maybe, if it meets before the deadline, include this on our next, somehow in our next mail out of utility bills?
We normally have a one-pager. That's about all we can stuff in the envelope besides a bill. That one-pager is always up for, we work with external relations to handle the most pertinent communication that we think at the time. If that's council's wish, we can absolutely include it in.
I think it's a great idea. If it could just be a lined item, bold, and just to highlight the fact that the census is coming up.
Sure. Yeah, Your Worship, that'd be fantastic. I'm sure there's no motion needed, but just whatever information Mr. Van Adricum thinks could get the message across clearly to our residents. It is extremely important, as Councillor Frizzell said, to getting that funding. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move now to F2. That was yours, Councillor Sampson, and it's a Initiatives Trust recommendation.
Yeah, thanks very much, Your Worship. I won't speak long on it. Just wanted to support their request and move it. And with the reason being, I just think it's really important that we're supporting these types of initiatives to help these groups, such as the Golf and Curling Club.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Everett. All those in favour in the room, opposed on phone and Zoom. Hearing, seeing no opposition, that's carried unanimously. Councillor Kraus, F3.
Thank you, Worship. And the letter is from the local food PG Society, local food systems and food security. I think that I just want to report to council that there is a focus on food security in the poverty reduction recommendations that are will be going out to consultation very soon. And I just wanted to say that recommendation number 11, and the key recommendation in there is for the is that we ask the city to strongly support the community development of a food charter. And I just want to say that number 11 of the recommendation number 11 is develop a food policy council and food charter. And so that's going out to consultation soon. And so when the report is complete, it'll come back to council. And hopefully it's well supported in the community, and that that was a recommendation from the expert we brought in on food security. So I just want to report that that's, if anybody was looking at that letter, it's in hand, I think. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Councillor Scott, were you going to comment on that, or was it something else?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Kraus. I knew exactly where you were going. It's important, and it's also a primary issue amongst seniors, food security.
Good, thank you. All right, so we don't need any recommendation there, it's in hand.
No, it's just information.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ramsey, F4.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to state that we did refer this issue back to the Intergovernmental Resolutions Committee from a previous correspondence letter. So I'm just wondering if we can respond to the City of Vernon, thanking them for their letter and letting them know that we have referred this back to the committee.
We can do that. Thank you, Mr. Babich.
Yes, Your Worship.
F5. Councillor Sampson, recommendation for NDIT.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Just wanted to support this as I just appreciate the work of the exploration place, and it's been a tough year for them. They've done their best to continue to contribute in whatever way they can to our community, but with COVID and being such an interactive facility, they've been closed for much of the year and altering how they do business. So just a bit of appreciation out to them for all they do, and appreciation for seeking out some funding to help them get reopened and make some changes that are needed to be open in this day and age with all that's going on. So I'll be moving the request and the motion to support the request.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Kraus, all those in favor in the room. Opposed on the phone or Zoom. Seeing no opposition, it's carried unanimously. Councillor Ramsey, F6, and I'm glad you pulled this one from Mayor Kennedy.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to ask, perhaps if Council could have an information session with Northern Health's public health arm to kind of provide more information on decriminalization, and then also perhaps ask you if there's any motion or referral for this letter back to the BC Mayor's Caucus, which I know.
Yeah, no, the BC Mayor's Caucus has been dealing with this. We just had a conversation about it last Friday. We will again on our weekly Friday meetings, and it's, as you probably have seen in the news, Mayor Stewart is working quite hard with the feds and the province. There's been a number of police jurisdictions have come forward and spoke about this letter that he's put together, and so we're going to continue to work on it. Not every municipality I think has, they have different opinions, so I think what it is, it's an opportunity for us to do just that, do a little bit of research, talk to Northern Health, RCMP, and get a feel for where it may go in our community.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate an information session.
Yeah, you bet I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. F7, Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. It's from the Prince George Atlantic Club, and they want just a recommendation from Council to support an NDI trust application. The Atlantic Club is a place for people to go that are in alcoholic recovery. It's a great organization, so I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconder by Councillor Everett. All those in favor of the recommendation in the room. Opposed on the phone or Zoom. Hearing no opposition. That's carried unanimously. Thanks very much, Councillor Skaken. It's a great organization. Nobody pulled F8. I'll speak just for a couple of minutes on F9 and 10. You'll see the correspondence dated December 21st that was signed by myself, acting CAO Mr. Babich, and Melissa Barcelos, our Manager of Economic Development. And this letter was as a result of a meeting that I had with NAV Canada and the piece that they are reviewing, which is the closure of some 24 air traffic control sites throughout Canada. There's 3 in BC. The conversation centered around those locations, but more specifically around our air traffic control tower here in Prince George. Would mean that it would, if NAV Canada presented their findings to do away with the staffing of that particular air traffic control site, those recommendations would be made to the new Minister of Transportation under the federal Liberal government. I think the letter that was written on December 21st really highlights and outlines our concerns from a safety perspective to an economic development to a health perspective. The other letter that I just recently signed off on goes to the new Minister of Transportation, and this letter is signed off by 6 of us across the country, and I would like to thank Mayor Masters from Regina, who really spearheaded this drive. And again, we're very concerned about the process. You'll see in that letter that we signed off on just a couple of days ago, is the fact of the matter is that it would appear that many decisions are made already, and this concerns us greatly because that wasn't the initial message that we received from NAV Canada. And we are going to continue to fight this. We think that it's an absolute tragedy to have our air traffic control tower unstaffed. It's a huge impact, not only to us, but the entire region. And I would say central and northern BC are going to be significantly impacted if this happens. And I want to thank, first of all, Councillor Ramsey and Mayor Story, NCLGA, and the work you're doing with the municipalities throughout the NCLGA region to step up and provide us with letters of support. And they are doing that as a result of your drive. So thank you. And if you'd pass that on to Mayor Story as well and your team at NCLGA. Tremendous amount of municipalities that are stepping up and providing those support letters. UBCM, the conversations I've had with the current president, not only that, but FCM and conversations I've had with Councillor Frizzell and the work that he's doing as president of FCM at that federal level. We're depending on these organizations to, particularly, I would say, with your team in Ottawa being able to be so close, almost across the street from the minister's office. So a piece of our next move is to educate and really inform the new Minister of Transportation about the significance of the loss. So we're going to keep on this, and we're very pleased that the premiers of the various provinces that are impacted are also now involved. So that's good news. So any questions? I don't have anybody in the queue, but thanks very much for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. If I could have a motion then to receive the pieces of correspondence. Thank you, Councillor Scott, Councillor Sampson. All those in favor of receipt in the room, opposed on the phone or Zoom. Seeing and hearing no opposition, it's carried unanimously. And if I could have a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Krause, Councillor Sampson. All those in favor in the room on adjournment, opposed on the phone and Zoom. Hearing and seeing none, we are adjourned. Thanks very much. Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor McConaughey, Councillor Skaken. Appreciate your perseverance on the phone and on Zoom. Have a good evening, everybody.